The woman who worked for him for 7 years and never let him see her hands shake. Date. Hook. Opening. 100 words. The elevator stopped between the 41st and 42nd floors at 9:47 on a Tuesday night, and for the first time in 7 years, Lena Hart had nowhere left to hide. Adrian DeLuca was standing 3 feet away, loosening his tie, looking at her the way a man looks at something he's finally decided to stop pretending he doesn't want. "I'm going to ask you a question," he said quietly, "and I need the truth." Her pulse hit her throat. She already knew what he was going to ask. She had been terrified of it for years. Before we go any further, if you love slow burn stories about the moment a woman finally stops running from what she wants, stay with me until the very end, hit that like button, and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled tonight. Now, let's go back to how Lena Hart ended up trapped in that elevator with the one man she'd spent 7 years trying not to love. Lena Hart learned to keep her hands still when she was 19 years old, in a diner off Route 9 in New Jersey, carrying 4 plates of eggs up her left arm while a man at table 6 kept calling her sweetheart in a voice that made her skin feel borrowed. She learned it the way some women learn to smile at things that aren't funny, out of necessity. You kept your hands still, you kept your face flat. You didn't give anyone anything they hadn't paid for. That was the rule. That was the whole rule. 12 years later, she was 31, and her hands were still steady. They were steady when she poured coffee for a United States senator in a glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor of the DeLuca Tower. They were steady when she stood beside her boss during a hostile acquisition and watched 3 grown men in $4,000 suits try to intimidate him and fail. They were steady when she signed non-disclosure agreements that could have destroyed her life if she'd ever broken them. And they were steady when she carried a folder of documents through a marble lobby while photographers shouted questions at the man walking 2 steps in front of her. Her hands were steady for everything except him. Adrian DeLuca didn't know that, of course. That was the point. That was the entire architecture of her life. He thought she was unflappable. He'd told her so once in the back of a town car on the way to LaGuardia after she'd handled a reporter who had tried to corner him about a lawsuit that didn't exist yet. "You don't rattle," he'd said, and then he'd looked out the window for the rest of the ride, and she'd sat 3 feet away from him with her fingernails pressed so hard into her palm that she drew blood through the lining of her coat pocket. She had been working for him for 7 years. 7 years, 2 months, and 11 days, if she was being honest with herself, which she tried very hard not to be. The DeLuca Tower took up a full city block in the financial district, 44 floors of black glass and brushed steel, and the people who worked there liked to say that the building had a mood. On good days, when the market was up and Adrian was in the country, the lobby buzzed. Elevators moved fast. Baristas at the coffee bar on the 2nd floor smiled like they meant it. On bad days, on days when Adrian had flown back from Zurich at 3 in the morning and nobody knew why, on days when his father was in town, on days when the phrase "the old man" started circulating through the executive floors like weather, the whole building seemed to hold its breath. Tuesday, October the 14th, was one of the bad days. Lena felt it the moment she walked through the revolving door at 6:52 a.m. The security guard, Marcus, who usually gave her a nod and a morning "Ms. Hart," gave her a tight, worried half-smile instead. The elevator lobby was too quiet. 2 junior associates from legal were standing by the express banks with their heads bent together, whispering, and they straightened up and stopped talking when they saw her coming. She didn't ask. She never asked. That was also a rule. On the 42nd floor, her assistant Priya was already at her desk, which was unusual. Priya was usually a 7:15 arrival at the earliest, and she was eating a protein bar with the grim efficiency of a soldier eating before a battle. "He's been here since 4, Priya said, without looking up. Lena set down her coat. "Why?" "Nobody's saying." "Is his father here?" "Not yet, but Camille called 3 times. Lena stopped moving. Camille DeLuca was Adrian's cousin, and Camille DeLuca didn't call for any reason that didn't involve either money or blood, and usually both. Lena had met her twice. She hadn't liked either time. "Did you put her through?" "He told me not to." "Good." Priya finally looked up. She was 26 years old with sharp black eyes and a way of delivering bad news in the same voice most people use to order lunch. "Lena, he asked if you were in yet. Twice." "Okay." He said Lena when he asked, not Ms. Hart. Lena held Priya's gaze for one long second. Then she picked up her coat again, hung it on the hook inside her office door, and said, "Get me the Ferreira numbers from yesterday, and tell whoever's downstairs to stop gossiping in the express bank. If I can hear them from the elevator, the whole building can." "On it." She closed her office door. She stood in the middle of her own office for a moment with her hand still on the doorknob, and she made her hand stop shaking before she let go. Not Ms. Hart. Lena. He had called her Lena maybe 20 times in 7 years. She could have listed each occasion. She had listed each occasion at 3 in the morning more than once, in a studio apartment on the Upper West Side that she could technically afford, but that still, after all this time, felt like someone else's life she was borrowing. She sat down at her desk. She opened her laptop. She pulled up the Ferreira numbers before Priya even had a chance to send them, because she already knew them by heart, and she started working. That was the other rule. When in doubt, work. Adrian DeLuca was 39 years old, and on the morning of October the 14th, he had not slept in 31 hours. His office was on the 44th floor, 2 above hers, and it had a view of the harbor that he almost never looked at. He was standing at his desk, not sitting at it, reading a printed email for the 4th time. The email was from a private investigator he kept on a quiet retainer in Lisbon, and it contained 2 sentences and a photograph. And the photograph was of his cousin Camille shaking hands with a man named Victor Kowalski outside a hotel in Porto. Victor Kowalski was not a man Camille should have been shaking hands with. Victor Kowalski was the reason Adrian's uncle was buried in a cemetery in Queens instead of living out his retirement in Florida like he was supposed to. Adrian set the email down on his desk. He put his palms flat on the wood on either side of it. He breathed in through his nose for a count of 4, held it for a count of 4, let it out for a count of 4. He had learned that from a therapist he had stopped seeing 5 years ago, and it was one of the few things he had kept. Then he picked up his phone and called his brother. "It's early," Matteo said on the second ring. Matteo was in Milan. It was afternoon there. Camille met with Kowalski. There was a pause. A long one. "You're sure?" "I have a photograph." "How good?" "Good enough?" Another pause. Adrian could hear Matteo breathing, and he could hear behind Matteo's breathing the faint sound of an espresso machine, which meant his brother was in the cafe on Via Monte Napoleone that he had been going to every morning since he was 22. And that cafe was a 10-minute walk from an apartment where a woman named Sophia lived, and Sophia was not Matteo's wife. Adrian noted all of this without comment. He had a very large and very quiet file in his head about his brother's life. "She's family," Matteo said finally. "She met with Kowalski." "Adrian, I didn't say I was going to do anything. I said I have a photograph." "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell the old man before she does." Matteo exhaled. "He's going to ask you what you want to do." "I know. Do you know what you want to do?" Adrian looked out the window. He looked at the harbor he never looked at. The water was the color of lead. "Not yet," he said. He hung up. He stood at his desk for another minute, not moving. Then he sat down, finally, and he opened his laptop and he typed a message to his assistant on the floor below. "Is Lena in yet?" 3 minutes later, "Yes, Mr. DeLuca." He read that twice. He closed the laptop. He stood up again. He went to the window. He didn't know, yet, that by the end of the night, he was going to break a rule he had made when he was 26 years old. A rule he had made in a hospital room in Boston, at the foot of his mother's bed, while she was dying of a cancer she had hidden from him for a year and a half. He didn't know yet that by the end of the night he was going to stand in an elevator between the 41st and the 42nd floors and ask Lena Hart a question he had been swallowing for 7 years. He only knew, standing there at the window, that he was tired, and that his cousin had betrayed him, and that the one person in the building he wanted to talk to about it was the one person he had trained himself, with great discipline and at enormous personal cost, never to talk to about anything real. "Damn it," he said quietly, to no one. By 11 in the morning, the rumor had reached the 42nd floor. Priya brought it in with a cup of coffee and a pastry Lena hadn't asked for. "There's a situation," she said, setting both down on Lena's desk with the air of someone disposing of evidence. I don't know what it is, but legal just canceled 3 lunches, and Ben from compliance went up to 44 20 minutes ago, and he hasn't come back. Is Camille in town? No one's saying. Lena took a sip of the coffee. Who have you talked to? I don't talk, Priya said, offended. Who have you listened to? Marcus, the girl at reception on 43, a paralegal in legal who has a crush on me. What did the paralegal say? She said the word Kowalski. Lena set the coffee down. She didn't know who Victor Kowalski was. She didn't work on that side of the business. There was a side of Adrian DeLuca's life that she had access to, and there was a side she didn't, and she had been careful for 7 years not to ask about the side she didn't. But she knew a bad name when she heard one, and she knew, by the look on Priya's face, that Priya had heard it said in a voice that had gone quiet, the way voices went quiet when somebody was scared. Okay, she said. She pulled the pastry toward her. She didn't eat it. Clear my afternoon. Don't tell anyone why. Tell them I'm on a call. What if he asks for you? Then I'm not on a call. Lena. Priya. Priya stopped. Her dark eyes narrowed a little. You're scared of him today. I'm not scared of him? You are. You're doing the thing with your hand. Lena looked down. Her left hand was flat on the desk, and her index finger was tapping, just slightly, against the wood. She made it stop. Go, she said. Priya went. Lena sat in her office for a long time after that, not working. She was thinking about the first time she had met Adrian DeLuca. Awesome. It had been a Thursday in March, 7 years and some months ago. She had been 24. She had just gotten her MBA from a state school nobody had heard of. She had been rejected from every consulting firm she had applied to, and she had been temping at a staffing agency that had sent her to the DeLuca Tower to fill in for a receptionist on the 38th floor who had called in with the flu. She had been wearing a gray skirt from a store that no longer existed, and a blouse she had ironed herself at 5 in the morning. She had been sitting at the reception desk for about 2 hours when the elevator opened, and a man walked out who did not look at her, did not look at anyone, and walked directly to the office at the end of the hall. 30 seconds later, the office door opened again, and he came back out, and he looked at her. The folder, he said, on my desk. She didn't say, excuse me. She didn't say, I don't work here, sir. She said, which folder? He looked at her for 1 extra second. The red one, he said. She got up. She walked down the hall. She went into his office, and she saw 3 red folders, and she picked the one on top, and she brought it back to him. He took it. He looked at it. He looked at her again. This is the wrong one, he said. Okay. Try again. She went back. She brought the second one. No. She went back. She brought the third one. Yes. He walked to the elevator. The doors opened. He stepped in. Then, just before the doors closed, he looked at her one more time and he said, What's your name? Lena Hart. You don't work at this desk. No. Where do you work? Nowhere. The doors closed. 2 days later, a man named Stephen from Human Resources called her and told her that Mr. DeLuca's executive assistant had quit that morning and that Mr. DeLuca had requested that the girl from the 38th floor be interviewed for the position. She had said yes before she had let herself understand what it meant. She had told herself, all the way through the interview, all the way through the first month, all the way through the first year, that it was a job, that it was a paycheck, that she was a professional, that the heat in her face when he said her name was nothing, and it would go away. It hadn't gone away. It had gotten worse. The rest of the day went sideways in small, almost invisible ways. At 1:15, Adrian canceled his 2 o'clock with the board chair of a shipping company in Athens, which he never did. At 2:40, a man Lena had never seen before, tall, 40-something, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, walked off the 44th floor elevator and was led into Adrian's office without an appointment. He was in there for 40 minutes. When he came out, he didn't look at anyone, and he got back in the elevator, and he left. At 4:10, Camille DeLuca called the main line on the 42nd floor, asking for Lena by name. Tell her I'm in a meeting, Lena said. You're not in a meeting. Priya. Sorry. Priya picked up the phone. Lena listened through the open door. Miss DeLuca, Ms. Hart is in a meeting at the moment. May I take a message? Of course. Of course. I will certainly pass that along. Priya came in and closed the door behind her. She said to tell you that she hopes you're keeping an eye on her cousin because the family has had some concerns about his recent behavior, and she would appreciate it very much if you could give her a call back at your earliest convenience. Lena said, What? That's what she said. She said the family has concerns. Word for word. Lena put her elbows on her desk. She put her hands over her face. She counted to 10. Then she said quietly into her hands, She's trying to make me a witness. A witness to what? I don't know yet. Are you going to tell him? Lena took her hands away from her face. Not yet, she said. That was a mistake, and she would know it was a mistake within 4 hours, and she would regret it for a long time after that. But for now, she said not yet. And Priya nodded, and the day kept going, and at 6:30 the cleaning crew started on the 28th floor and worked their way up. And at 7:45 the last of the analysts left. And at 8:30 Priya put her head into Lena's office and said, I'm going home. Are you going home? Soon. Lena, go home. Soon. You're going to sit here until he leaves, aren't you? Lena didn't answer. Okay, Priya said. Don't stay past 10. She left. Lena did not go home. She sat at her desk, and she worked on a memo that did not need to be written that night. And every 10 minutes, she looked at the phone on her desk. And every 10 minutes, she did not call up to the 44th floor. And every 10 minutes, she told herself that this was fine, that she was fine, that she was a professional woman in a professional building. And then at 9:30, the phone on her desk rang. The display said, DeLuca, A. She let it ring twice. She made her hand stop. She picked it up on the third ring. Lena Hart. It's me, he said. His voice was low, tired. No preamble, no title. Just, it's me. As if they were two people who had already agreed somewhere, at some point, that they were the kind of people who said, it's me to each other. Mr. DeLuca. Don't. She said nothing. I'm coming down, he said. Don't leave. The line went dead. She sat with the phone in her hand for about 15 seconds. Then she put it back in the cradle. She stood up. She smoothed her skirt. She sat back down. She stood up again. She walked to the small mirror she kept inside her office closet, and she looked at herself in it, and she saw a woman with dark circles under her eyes and a mouth pressed into a line, and she thought, You have done nothing wrong. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You have kept your hands still for 7 years. You will keep them still for 7 more. She closed the closet. She sat back down at her desk. She waited. He came down at 9:46. She heard the elevator chime on her floor, and she heard the doors open, and she heard his footsteps. She would have known them anywhere. After 7 years, she could have picked them out in a stadium. And then he was in her doorway, in a dark suit without a tie, with his sleeves pushed up to his elbows, and his face looked older than it had looked that morning. He was holding a manila folder. Come with me, he said. Where? Up. To your office? Yes. She stood up. She grabbed her laptop. He held up a hand. Leave it. She left it. She followed him out to the elevator bank. He pressed the button. The doors opened almost immediately. The building was empty. The elevators were sitting at their floors, waiting. And they stepped in together, and the doors closed. He pressed 44. The elevator started up. And then, between 41 and 42, it stopped. Not with a jolt. Not with a dramatic shudder. It just slowed, the way an elevator slows when it reaches a floor, and then it didn't move, and the numbers on the display above the door stayed at 41 for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. The little bell that chimed when the doors opened did not chime. Adrian looked up at the display. Huh, he said quietly. He pressed 44 again. Nothing. He pressed 42. Nothing. He pressed the button for the lobby. Nothing. He pressed the red emergency button. There was a click, a dial tone. And then, after a pause so short it was almost not a pause at all, a recorded voice said, Your call has been received. Please remain calm. A technician has been notified. The voice clicked off. Of course, Adrian said. He looked at her, and then, And she would remember this moment for the rest of her life, in detail, in color, in the exact temperature of the air and the exact pressure of her shoes against the elevator floor. He set the folder down on the little railing that ran along the back wall of the elevator, and he loosened his tie, which was already loose, and he turned to face her fully, and he said, "How long has it been, Lena?" "I'm sorry?" "How long have you worked for me?" 7 years. 7 years, 2 months, and 11 days. She said it before she thought. She said it because he'd said it first, and her mouth had answered out of muscle memory, and the second it was out of her mouth, she wanted to take it back. And she saw, the moment he registered it. His eyes didn't widen. He didn't smile. But something in his face went very still, the way a hunter's face goes still when an animal steps into the clearing, and she felt her whole chest drop about 6 inches. 11 days, he repeated. It's a round number. No, it isn't. She didn't say anything. He took one step toward her, not a large step, just one. "Lena, Mr. DeLuca, don't do that. I don't know what you want me to—" "Yes, you do." She felt her hand start to shake. She pressed her palm flat against the wall of the elevator behind her back so he wouldn't see. "I'm going to ask you a question," he said quietly, "and I need the truth. Just once. Just tonight. I'm not going to ask you again. Do you understand me?" "Yes." "What are you afraid of?" "I don't—" "What are you afraid of, Lena?" "I'm not afraid of anything." "Don't lie to me." It came out sharper than he meant it to. She saw him register that too. The small tightening at the corner of his jaw, the flicker of regret. And he looked down at his own hands for a second, and when he looked up again, his face had softened, and that was worse. That was so much worse. She could have handled him angry. She had handled him angry before. She did not know how to handle him gentle. "I'm sorry," he said. "That came out— I'm sorry. Let me try again." He took a slow breath. "I've had a very bad day," he said. "I've had a very bad week. I think I'm about to have a very bad year. There are things going on in my family that I won't bring into this building, but they are going to affect this building, and they are going to affect you, because you work closely with me, and because—" He stopped. He looked at her. He started again. "Because I have not been a good liar about a certain thing for a long time, and I think you know what the thing is, and I think the reason you flinch every time I say your name is that you also know. And I have tried very hard to respect, whatever it is you need me to respect, for 7 years, 2 months, and 11 days. He paused. "But I cannot do tomorrow," he said, "what I have been doing for 7 years. I don't have it in me anymore. And before I figure out what that means, I need to know one thing from you, just one. And then you can say nothing else tonight. You can walk out of this building and not come back until Monday. You can quit if you want to quit. I will write you a reference that will get you any job in this city. I will never mention this again. I will never stand this close to you again. I promise you that." She was crying. She didn't know when she had started. There were 2 tears on her cheeks, and her hands were shaking now in a way she couldn't hide, and she pulled her hand out from behind her back because what was the point anymore? And she folded her arms across her chest and held onto her own elbows. "What's the question?" she whispered. "What are you afraid of?" She closed her eyes. She had rehearsed, in her head, 1,000 answers to 1,000 versions of this question, over 7 years, 2 months, and 11 days. She had rehearsed nothing, and "I don't know what you mean," and "Mr. DeLuca, this is inappropriate, and I think I should go." She had rehearsed them at 3 in the morning, at 6 in the morning, in the shower, on the subway, in the elevator going up, in the elevator going down. She had an entire library of answers. None of them came. Instead, what came out of her mouth, in a voice she barely recognized as her own, was the truth. "I'm afraid," she said, "that if I ever let you see how much I—" Her throat closed. She forced it open. "If I ever let you see, I'm going to lose everything. My job, the way I've built my life, the way I've made myself. I'm afraid that I'll let you see, and I'll be wrong about what you feel, and I'll have humiliated myself in front of the only person whose opinion I—" She stopped. She laughed, one short, wet laugh. "And I'm afraid I'll be right, and that'll be worse." "Why would it be worse?" "Because I'm not—" She stopped. "You're not what?" "I'm not enough for you." He looked at her. He looked at her for a long time, and then he said very quietly, "Lena, you have been enough for me every single day for 7 years. I have been trying every single day for 7 years to be enough for you." She started to say something. She didn't know what. It didn't matter, because the elevator jolted suddenly, and the lights flickered, and the voice on the emergency speaker said, "Apologies for the delay. Service has been restored." And the elevator started to move again, up, smoothly, as if nothing had happened at all. 42, 43, 44. The doors opened. He didn't move. She didn't move. The doors started to close. He put his hand out and stopped them. "Go home," he said. "Not because I want you to. Because it's late, and you're tired, and tomorrow is going to be something, and I don't know what, and I don't want you to decide anything tonight that you can't take back." Adrian. It was the first time she had ever said his name to his face. He closed his eyes for a half-second, like the sound of it hurt him. "Please," he said, "go home." She stepped out of the elevator. He stayed in. The doors closed between them. She stood on the 44th floor alone, in the dim light of a hallway that was never dim. The cleaning crew had turned the lights down, and she pressed her hand flat against the wall beside the elevator, and she made herself breathe. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. She had learned that from a therapist she'd stopped seeing 5 years ago, and it was one of the few things she had kept. She walked down the hall. She took the other elevator. She rode down 44 floors in silence, and when the doors opened on the lobby, Marcus was still at the security desk, and he looked up, and whatever he saw on her face made him decide not to say goodnight, Ms. Hart. He just nodded, once, gently, like a man saying goodbye to a sister at a train station, and she nodded back, and she walked out into the cold October air of lower Manhattan, and she got into a taxi, and she went home. Adrian rode up to the 44th floor alone. He walked into his office. He didn't turn on the overhead lights. He went to the window, the one he almost never looked out of, and he put his forehead against the glass, and he stood there for a long time. The harbor was black. The lights on the water moved slowly, a tug pushing a barge south, a ferry coming back from Staten Island. Somewhere out there, in a hotel room in Porto, his cousin was sleeping next to a problem she had made for all of them. Somewhere in Milan, his brother was probably awake, staring at a ceiling he shouldn't have been staring at. Somewhere in New Jersey, or a Brooklyn walk-up, or wherever Lena Hart had decided to build her quiet, careful life, he realized, with a start, that he didn't actually know where she lived. He knew her employment address. He knew her emergency contact. He knew her allergies. He knew the coffee order she had every morning and the one she had on Fridays. He knew she never took more than 4 days of vacation in a row. He knew she called her mother every Sunday night at 7. Somewhere out there, she was getting out of a taxi. He thought about the things she had said. "I'm not enough for you." He thought about the way she had said it. Not like an insult, not like a complaint. Like a piece of information she had been carrying around in her pocket for 7 years, turning it over in her hand every morning before she came to work. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. He typed, "I'm sorry about the elevator." He deleted it. He typed, "Are you home?" He deleted it. He typed, "I meant every word I said." He looked at that one for a long time. He didn't send it. He didn't delete it either. He locked the phone and put it in his pocket and went back to his desk and opened the manila folder he had carried down to her office, and he spread the photographs out across the polished wood. Camille in Porto, shaking hands with Victor Kowalski. Camille, in a cafe in Lisbon, with a man Adrian's investigator hadn't identified yet. Camille at an airport in Madrid, carrying a bag he had seen before. He had seen it in a photograph of his uncle, 8 years ago, the week before his uncle had been shot in a parking lot in Queens. He pressed his palms flat against his desk, on either side of the photographs. He breathed in for 4. He held for 4. He let it out for 4. Somewhere in the building, a cleaning cart rolled past his door. He picked up his desk phone. He dialed a number he knew by heart, a number that was not in any system anywhere, a number he had not dialed in 3 years. It rang twice. A voice answered. A man's voice. Old, calm, quiet. "Adriano," the voice said, in Italian. "Papa," Adrian said. "We have a problem." Lena got home at 10:40. She did not turn on the lights in her apartment. She took off her coat. She hung it on the hook by the door. She set her keys in the bowl. She set her bag on the floor. She walked into her small kitchen and she poured a glass of water and she drank it standing at the sink in the dark. Her hands were shaking so badly she could hear the glass knocking against her teeth. She set it down. She went into her bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed. She did not take off her work clothes. She sat there in her blouse and her skirt and her stockings, and she stared at the wall, and she thought about the look on his face when she had said, "I'm not enough for you." The look on his face had been, she didn't have a word for it. She had spent 7 years cataloging every expression that had ever crossed Adrian DeLuca's face, and she did not have a word for the one she had seen tonight. Her phone buzzed in her bag. She didn't go get it, then she did. It was a text from an unknown number. She knew it wasn't an unknown number. She knew it was his personal cell because she was the one who had set up the phone 7 years ago, and she had entered the SIM card number into a database, and she had memorized it the way she memorized everything he touched. The text said, "I meant every word I said." She sat on the floor of her bedroom in her work clothes with her phone in her hand, and she read it again, and again, and again. And then, for the first time in 7 years, 2 months, and 11 days, Lena Hart put her head down on her knees and cried. Not the small, careful crying she had done in the elevator, but the real kind. The kind she had not let herself do since she was 19 years old in a diner off Route 9. The kind she had sworn she would never do again. Not for a man, not for a job, not for anything. She cried because she was afraid. She cried because she was relieved. She cried because somewhere in the city, on the 44th floor of a black glass tower, a man she had loved without permission for 7 years had just told her, in 6 words, that he had been loving her back the whole time. And she cried because she knew already, she had always known, that nothing that started in an elevator at 41.5 floors above the ground ever stayed that simple. Outside, it started to rain. Her phone lit up again. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, and she picked it up, and she looked at the screen. It was Priya. "Are you still at the office?" She almost laughed. She typed back, "No, I'm home." 3 dots. "Good. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a day." Lena looked at the text for a long time. Then she typed, very slowly, with fingers that were no longer quite as steady as they used to be. "Yeah, it is." She put the phone down on the floor beside her. She leaned her head back against the side of her bed. She closed her eyes. And somewhere across the river, in an office she had walked into for the first time 7 years and 2 months and 11 days ago, a man she had not yet let herself think of by his first name until tonight, was standing at a window, watching the same rain start to fall, and making a decision about what kind of man he was going to be, starting tomorrow morning for the rest of his life. The rain did not stop until almost 4 in the morning, and when Lena woke up at 6:15, her face was pressed against the side of her mattress, her legs folded under her on the floor, and her neck had a crick in it that was going to stay with her all day. Her phone was beside her on the carpet, the screen dark. She picked it up. She looked at the text again. "I meant every word I said." And she sat there for a long moment with her thumb hovering over the keyboard, and in the end she didn't answer. She stood up. Her skirt was wrinkled beyond saving. Her stockings had torn at some point during the night, and she hadn't noticed. She peeled everything off and got in the shower and stood under water that was too hot and let it run down the back of her neck until the skin there went pink. And she tried, very hard, to think about anything other than the sound of his voice saying, "I have been trying, every single day for 7 years, to be enough for you." She failed. By 7:15 she was dressed. Navy blouse, black pencil skirt, hair pulled back so tight it pulled at her temples. She looked in the mirror above her bathroom sink, and for a second she didn't recognize herself. Her eyes were puffy, her mouth was doing something wrong, something unfamiliar. And she thought, he's going to see it on you. Everyone's going to see it on you. She put on mascara, she put on lipstick. She took the lipstick off because it was too much. She put it back on because without it she looked sick. She stopped looking in the mirror. She got to the building at 7:50. Marcus looked up from the security desk, nodded, said nothing. The elevator up to 42 was empty. When she stepped off, Priya was already at her desk, same as yesterday. Except Priya took one look at her face and stood up without saying anything and went to the little kitchenette at the end of the hall and came back with a mug of black coffee and set it on Lena's desk and said very quietly, "What happened?" "Nothing." Lena. Priya. Okay. Priya sat down at her own desk. She didn't press. That was the thing about Priya. She pressed on the days you needed pressing, and she didn't on the days you didn't, and somehow she always knew which was which. Lena had never asked her how. Lena took a sip of the coffee. It was scalding. She held it in her mouth for a second longer than she should have, because the burn gave her something to think about that wasn't his hand in her doorway last night. At 8:03, her desk phone rang. She flinched before she'd even registered the sound. The display said Priya, extension 4201, which meant Priya was calling her from 10 feet away, which meant Priya didn't want to say something out loud. What? He's not here, Priya said in the hushed voice she used for what she called interesting information. He's not in the building. Where is he? I don't know. His car didn't come in this morning. Raul from the garage told me. Has he canceled anything? Not yet. His 9 o'clock is the Ferreira team, and they're already on a plane from Sao Paulo. Okay. Lena. What? Camille is on her way up. Lena set the coffee down. The mug made a small, hard sound against the desk. Say that again. She checked in downstairs 4 minutes ago. She's in the express elevator. Who gave her a badge? I think she has a standing one. She's family. She does not have a standing one for this floor. I know that. You know that. The desk downstairs apparently does not know that. Lena closed her eyes. She breathed in for 4, held for 4, let it out for 4. She opened her eyes, and she stood up, and she smoothed the front of her skirt, and she said, Keep your door open. If I raise my voice, call Ben in compliance. Got it. She walked out into the reception area just as the elevator chimed and the doors opened and Camille DeLuca stepped off. Camille was 44, tall, narrow, and she dressed like a woman who had opinions about the word effortless. Pale pink silk blouse, cream trousers, a handbag that cost more than Lena's first car. Her hair was the color of honey and pulled back in a low knot at the nape of her neck, and her mouth was doing the particular Camille DeLuca smile that Lena had learned, over the last 7 years, to read the way a sailor reads clouds. Lena, Camille said, warmly, reaching out both hands. Sweetheart, how are you? Ms. DeLuca. Oh, stop, Camille, we're past that. Mr. DeLuca isn't in. I know, darling. I'm not here to see him. Camille dropped her hands, looked around the reception area with a small, critical expression, as if she were inspecting it for a magazine. I'm here to see you. I was hoping you might have 10 minutes for me. I have a 9 o'clock. It's 8:05. My 10 minutes before my 9 o'clock are not open, Camille? Camille's smile tightened half a millimeter. She had expected a yes. She usually got a yes. Lena watched her recalibrate, watched the pretty friendly mask slip a little and then slide right back into place, and she thought, oh, she's nervous. She's actually nervous. 5 minutes then. In your office. I insist. Lena held her gaze for a beat. Then she said, 5 minutes. She turned and walked back to her office. Camille followed. Lena did not close the door all the way. She left it open a crack, enough for Priya to hear if she raised her voice, and she sat down behind her desk instead of at the small sitting area by the window, and she did not offer Camille coffee. Camille sat anyway. She crossed her long legs. She let the silence sit for exactly 4 seconds before she spoke. I'm worried about him, Camille said. Are you? I've been worried about him for a while now, Lena. I don't think you understand how much we love him, the family. He's not himself. He hasn't been for months, maybe longer. And I hate to say this because I think the world of you, I really do, but I think part of the reason is that he spends too much time with people who tell him what he wants to hear. Camille, let me finish. No. Lena said it quietly, and the quiet did more than loud would have. Camille stopped with her mouth slightly open. Lena looked at her across the desk and felt something cold and tight gather at the base of her throat, and she thought about a photograph she hadn't seen, a name she'd heard once through a closed door, a phone call that had come in at 4:10 yesterday afternoon from a woman who had wanted to make her a witness. I don't know what you think this is, Lena said, but I'm not going to sit here while you tell me I am bad for him. If you have something to say to your cousin, you can say it to your cousin. He is not in the building today. When he is in the building, you are welcome to request a meeting through his office, like everyone else. Now, I have a lot of work to do. Lena, honey. Camille leaned forward. Her voice dropped. I'm trying to help you. You're not. There are things about Adrian, things about this family, that you don't know, that you don't want to know. I'm telling you this as a woman, one woman to another, because I have been where you are. I have loved a DeLuca man. I have watched what it does. I am asking you, sincerely, walk away, before it gets bad, before you get hurt. 5 minutes is up. I'm not finished. You are. For a long second, the mask dropped entirely. Camille's face went flat, and behind the flatness, Lena saw something she'd never seen in her before. Calculation, naked and a little panicked, a woman doing math with the numbers she had left. Then the mask came back. Camille stood up smoothly, smoothed her blouse, picked up her handbag. I hope you know what you're doing, she said. I hope you do too. Camille paused at the door. She looked back over her shoulder. Tell him I stopped by, won't you? I'll tell him. She walked out. Lena sat at her desk for a full minute without moving. Then she picked up her phone and texted Priya, 4 words. Get me Ben, now. Ben from compliance came up from 39 in under 6 minutes. He was a small, nervous man in his 50s with a bad shave and very clean glasses, and Lena had worked with him long enough to know that he looked like he was about to apologize for something even when he hadn't done anything wrong, and that this look was extremely misleading because Ben was the smartest person in the building about the one thing Ben was smart about. Close the door, Lena said. He closed it. Camille DeLuca was just in my office for 4.5 minutes. She tried to convince me that Adrian is emotionally unstable and that I should distance myself from him before the family has to intervene. Yesterday afternoon, she called my line and told my assistant that the family had concerns about his recent behavior and that I should call her back. I want a written summary of both conversations on my desk by 11. I want it stamped. I want it witnessed. I want it kept. Ben blinked once. You think she's building a case? I think she's starting to. For what? I don't know yet. Ben nodded. He pushed up his glasses. Does he know she's here? He will in an hour. Lena. What? Are you okay? She looked at him. Ben, with his bad shave and his clean glasses, and his quiet competence, and the fact that he had worked on the 42nd floor for 11 years without ever, once, making her feel like she was only a pretty woman in a chair. I don't know, she said, honestly. Okay, Ben said. I'll have it to you by 10:30. He left. At 8:47, her desk phone rang again. She picked it up without looking. Lena Hart. It's me, Adrian said. She closed her eyes. Where are you? Queens. I'm at a cemetery. I'll be back by 11. I need you to cancel the Ferrera 9, reschedule them for tomorrow morning, first thing. Offer them the penthouse suite at the Greenwich for tonight, on me, with a car and dinner. If they push back, give them whatever they want. I don't care. Okay? Lena. Yes. How are you? The question landed under her sternum and stayed there. She didn't answer right away. She heard traffic on his end of the line, the slow honk of a horn, wind against the phone. He was standing somewhere outside. He was at a grave. Your cousin came to see me, she said. A long pause. When? 10 minutes ago. She was here for less than 5. I have Ben writing it up. She also called yesterday afternoon and asked Priya to pass a message that the family had concerns about your recent behavior. Another pause. Longer. Lena, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm listening. Do not be alone with her again. I wasn't going to be. I mean it. Not in this building, not in a restaurant, not in a car, not in a lobby, not in a hallway. If she calls, Priya takes it. If she shows up, Marcus doesn't let her past the lobby. I'll make that call in 5 minutes. Do you understand me? Yes. Are you scared? A little. Good. That's smart. I'll be there by 11. Adrian. Silence. She had said it again, his first name. Out loud, at work, on a company line. She heard him breathe. Yes. What were you doing in Queens? He took a moment. Talking to my uncle, he said. He's not a good listener anymore, but I talked to him anyway. I'll explain later. I have to go. He hung up. She held the phone for a second. Then she set it down. Then she did what she always did. She worked. She called the lead partner on the Ferrera team and blamed the weather. She called the Greenwich and spoke to a concierge she had on a first-name basis and got the penthouse. She sent Priya to meet them at the airport. She rescheduled every meeting on his calendar for the rest of the morning. She drafted the memo for Ben. She drank 3 glasses of water, one after another, standing at the small sink in her office closet because her mouth kept going dry. He walked in at 10:58. He did not come up to 44 first. He came straight to 42, straight into the open plan area outside her office, and he was not alone. He had a man with him, older, maybe 60, gray at the temples, in a suit that was expensive in the quiet way that meant I have worn expensive suits for 40 years rather than I just bought this one. The older man had kind eyes and the kind of posture that was used to being listened to. Adrian stopped in front of Priya's desk. Priya, this is Mr. Rienzi. He's going to be working with us for a while. Please get him anything he needs. Mr. Rienzi, Priya runs this floor. Anything she tells you, you do, including leaving. Priya smiled, just barely. Pleasure, Mr. Rienzi? Miss, Rienzi said with a small, courtly nod. Then Adrian walked into Lena's office and closed the door. He did not sit down. He stood in front of her desk, with his hands in his pockets, and he looked at her, and she looked at him, and for a second neither of them said anything at all. Then he said, You look like you haven't slept. Neither do you. No? Who is Mr. Rienzi? A friend of the family. He used to do a particular kind of job for my father. He's retired. He's unretiring for a few weeks, at my request. A bodyguard. Several things, including that. For you. For you. She opened her mouth. She closed it. Adrian, don't argue. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to ask if you think I'm in danger. I think my cousin is in danger. I think the people my cousin is doing business with, without the family's permission, are people I have spent a great deal of money and a great deal of patience keeping out of this building for 12 years. And I think that my cousin, having tried and failed to turn you into a mouthpiece yesterday, may try something else. So, until I understand the shape of what she's doing, Mr. Rienzi will be nearby when you are not in this building. He will drive you home. He will be in the lobby of your apartment tonight. He will be in a car behind your taxi tomorrow morning. He will be extremely polite. If you hate it, tell me, and we will find another solution. But we will find a solution. We will not find nothing. Okay. He blinked. Okay? I'm not going to argue with you about my safety, Adrian. I'm not stupid. No, you're not. He stood there a moment longer. He took his hands out of his pockets. He put them on the back of the chair in front of her desk, gripped it almost, then let go. About last night, he said. Adrian, let me finish. Okay. I was not fair to you. I stopped an elevator, I cornered you, I made you cry, and I asked you a question I had no business asking in a building where I sign your paycheck. I knew what I was doing. I chose to do it anyway. That was wrong, and I am sorry. And if you want to file a complaint with HR, I will not defend myself. I will write the complaint for you. I will sign it myself. I'm not going to file a complaint with HR. Good. I didn't want to write it. She laughed once before she could stop herself. He almost smiled. She saw it almost happen and then not happen, and his face went serious again. But Lena, I meant what I said in there. I meant all of it. And I am not going to take it back. And I am not going to pretend it didn't happen. And I'm not going to stand in this office and let you tell me you are not enough for me, because that is the single most wrong thing I have ever heard anyone say in my life. And I have heard some very wrong things. Adrian. Yes. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. You've done this before. Not this. No. I have not done this before. He said it in a voice that didn't leave any room for a question. She let it sit. She believed him. She didn't know why she believed him, but she did. I'm not going to be able to sit across from you at a conference table tomorrow, she said, and pretend last night didn't happen. I wouldn't ask you to. So what are we doing? He looked at her for a long time. I don't know yet, he said. I know I don't want to lose you, either as my right hand or as whatever else this is going to be. I know I want to find out, slowly and carefully, and without making you do anything you're not ready to do. I know I need to figure out what my cousin is doing and stop her, and I need to do that in the next couple of weeks. And I do not want any of this, us, whatever we are, to happen in the shadow of that. I want the shadow to pass first. And then I want to take you to dinner. Si panteichi golden. Dinner. Dinner. A real one. Not upstairs. Not in a conference room. Somewhere neither of us has ever been. Somewhere with bad lighting and a waiter who doesn't know either of our names. She felt her mouth tremble. She pressed her lips together. Okay. Okay. Adrian. Yes. You said last night that you had been trying for 7 years to be enough for me. I did. What does that mean? He was quiet for a moment. Then he walked around the desk, slowly, not close, just around, until he was leaning against the window behind her chair, looking out at the harbor that he never looked at. He didn't sit. He didn't touch her. He just stood there with the light behind him, and she turned her chair to face him, and she waited. When I hired you, he said, you were 24, I was 32. I had been running the East Coast side of my father's company for 4 years, and I had been doing a lot of things badly. I had a reputation, some of it earned. I was sleeping with women I shouldn't have been sleeping with. I was drinking too much. I was angry at my father, who was still running Europe and treating me like I was 21. My mother had been dead for 6 years, and I had not processed a single day of it. And one Thursday in March, I had to go to the 38th floor to pick up a folder, and there was a girl at a desk who did not work there. And I asked her for the folder, and she got me the wrong one. And I said, try again, and she did. She didn't apologize. She didn't flirt. She didn't do any of the things I had been trained by 12 years of running into women in lobbies to expect her to do. She just tried again, and she got it wrong again, and she tried again, and she got it right. He looked down at the floor, and I stood in the elevator and I thought, that's somebody who is going to be very good at this job if somebody doesn't waste her. And then I thought, don't waste her. And then I thought, and don't waste her any of the other ways you waste women either. And I decided right there, before the elevator doors opened on 44, that I was not going to be the kind of man who hired a woman because he wanted her and then pretended it was a job. I was going to hire you because you were good at the job, and I was going to keep it a job, and whatever the other thing was, I was going to put it somewhere in me and keep it there. She was crying again. She hated that she was crying again. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. For 7 years. For 7 years. Adrian, let me finish. Okay, I was not a saint, Lena. I want to be very clear about that. I was not living in a monastery. There were women. Some of them for a long time, some of them not. I was a functioning adult. I want you to know that, because I don't want to stand here and tell you a story where I come out looking like a martyr. But nobody in the last 7 years has ever been in this room with me the way you are in this room with me. And nobody has ever sat in that chair and known what I was thinking before I knew I was thinking it. And nobody has ever carried this building with me the way you have carried it. And I have tried every single morning to be a better man at work than I am at any other time of my life. Because you were going to walk in the door, and I did not want to be the kind of man who made you sorry you took the job. She couldn't speak. He looked at her, finally, directly. His eyes were tired. He looked his age for the first time in a long time. He looked like a man who had been standing up very straight for a very long time and was thinking about sitting down. I didn't expect, he said, that last night would be the night. I was going to wait. I was going to wait another year, maybe 2, until you were ready to leave this job on your own terms and take another one somewhere else. And then I was going to ask you to dinner like a normal person, and I was going to hope you said yes. But there are things coming, and I didn't want you to go into them thinking you were just my assistant. I didn't want you to be brave for me under false pretenses. I wanted you to know what you were being brave for. So I stopped the elevator and I asked you the question, and I am sorry about how I did it, but I am not sorry that I did it. He stopped. He waited. She took a long breath. She let it out. She put her hands flat on the desk, palms down. She looked at the back of her own hands for a minute. The small scar on her left thumb from a kitchen knife when she was 17, the freckle above her right knuckle, the plain silver ring her grandmother had given her on her 21st birthday. And she thought, okay. I'm going to say something, she said, and I'm only going to say it once, and I need you to not make me repeat it. Okay? I have loved you since the 4th month. He closed his eyes. I didn't know what it was at first, she said. I thought it was admiration. I thought it was a crush. I thought it was the kind of thing that would burn itself out in 6 weeks. And then 6 weeks became 6 months, and 6 months became a year, and every year I told myself that this was the year it would go away, and every year it didn't. And I made a decision, somewhere in the second year, that I was not going to be the kind of woman who threw away a good job for a man who was never going to feel the same way. I was going to be the kind of woman who did the work. I was going to be the kind of woman who kept her hands still. And I did. I did. For 5 more years, I did. And then yesterday I walked past Priya's desk, and you had asked for me by my first name. And I went into my office, and I shook so hard I couldn't sign a memo. And I thought, oh no, it's starting. And I was right. It was starting. And you stopped the elevator, and She stopped. And you were gentle with me, she said, and I did not know how to be a person anymore. Lena, I'm not finished. Sorry. I don't know if I know how to do this. I haven't. She laughed a small, embarrassed laugh. I haven't done a lot of this. At all. In any version. I haven't been a person's girlfriend since I was 21, and the person I was a girlfriend to was a college sophomore who cheated on me with a girl from his study group, and that is the extent of my experience with men. I am not the woman you think I am. I am not who you think I am, underneath. I have the clothes. I have the voice. I have the job. I do not have any of the rest of it, and I have been terrified for 7 years that one day you would find out, and it would be that you would see me, and I would see you see me, and I would... She took a breath. I would have to live through that. He took one step away from the window toward her, and then he stopped, because he could see that she was not done, and because he knew her well enough to know that if he moved one step more right now, she would never finish. So what I am telling you, she said, is that if we do this, whatever this is, you need to go slow. I'm not being coy. I'm not trying to make you work for it. I am telling you that I am a 31-year-old woman who has been living like a nun with a good wardrobe for 7 years, and if you push me too fast, I will panic. I will panic, and I will run, and I will feel humiliated, and I will not come back. I need you to... I know. No, you don't. You can't possibly... I do. She stopped. He was looking at her with an expression that she finally, in this moment, had a word for. The word was relief. You're not the only one, he said quietly, who has been keeping a secret about how much of themselves is actually in this building. She didn't know what to do with that. She sat, and he stood, and the sounds of the building moved around them. The hum of the ventilation, the distant bell of the elevator on another floor, Priya's voice in the outer office, low and calm, saying something to Mr. Rienzi that made Mr. Rienzi laugh a rusty old laugh. Life going on. A Tuesday going on. The world doing the thing the world did. Adrian, she said. Yes. Can I ask you something? Yes. Who was the man your investigator photographed with your cousin? His face changed. Not dramatically, just a small shift, like a window closing. His name is Victor Kowalski, he said. He is a man who had my father's brother, my uncle Paolo, shot in a parking lot in Queens 8 years ago. My uncle Paolo was the one who taught me how to run this company. He was the one who vouched for me with my father. He was the reason I got the East Coast when I was 28. He stopped. He was the closest thing to a father I had, because my father was busy being a son of a bitch, and my uncle was not. And 8 years ago, Victor Kowalski had him killed in a dispute about a shipping contract that should have been settled with lawyers and was not, and my family. We did not handle it the way my father wanted us to handle it, because I convinced him not to. I convinced him to do it legally. I convinced him that we were too big to do it any other way. We spent 3 years and a lot of money, and we put 2 of Kowalski's lieutenants in federal prison. And Kowalski himself walked, because we could not make the case stick. He walked, and he has been quiet for 8 years. And yesterday morning I received a photograph of him shaking hands with my cousin Camille in a hotel courtyard in Porto. And now she is walking into this building and telling the woman I love that I am unstable and that she should leave me before she gets hurt. Lena's heart was pounding. He had said it, the woman I love. And he hadn't paused, hadn't caught himself, hadn't looked at her after he'd said it. He had said it the way a man says a thing he has been saying in his head, privately, for a long time. She didn't stop him. She didn't react. She let him keep going because she understood, with the clarity of a woman who had watched him work for 7 years, that he needed to tell her this the whole way through without being interrupted. "I don't know what they want," he said. "I don't know if she's selling him information or if she's trying to set up some kind of deal without the family's approval, or if he's using her to get at me, or all of the above. I don't know if she understands what she's playing with. I'm going to find out. I am going to find out this week. And until I do, I'm not going to let you walk anywhere in this city alone. And I'm not going to let her anywhere near you. And I am not going to ask you to do anything about any of it except let Mr. Rienzi drive you home." "Okay, Lena. Yes. Tell me what you need from me right now, today, this afternoon. Just today. Not forever. Just today." She thought about it. "I need you to do your job," she said, "and let me do mine. I need you to find out what your cousin is doing. I need you to come back to this office at the end of the day and tell me what you found out, because I am going to worry otherwise, and I am not going to be able to sleep, and I need you to not think that's strange. And I need you to—" Her voice caught. "I need you to not touch me yet. Not because I don't want you to, because if you touch me right now, I am going to fall apart. And I have a team meeting at 2, and I cannot do a team meeting after falling apart. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good." He nodded, once. He pushed off from the window. He walked around her desk, and he passed behind her chair, and he did not touch her. He didn't even let his sleeve brush the back of her shoulder, though she could feel how close he was. And he walked to her office door, and he put his hand on the handle, and he turned back. "One more thing," he said. "What?" "When I came in here, I said I didn't know how to do this either. That wasn't entirely true. I know one thing about how to do it. I know I'm not going to be the first one to say it again. Not because I don't mean it, because I said it once today already, and you weren't ready. And I'm not going to say it again until you tell me you want me to. So when you're ready, Lena, you tell me. And I'll say it back. I'll say it as many times as you want. But I'm going to wait for you to ask." "Okay." "Okay." He opened the door. He walked out. She heard him say something low to Mr. Rienzi. She heard Priya say Mr. DeLuca. She heard the elevator chime. She heard the doors close. And she sat in her office, at her desk, with her hands flat on the wood. And she didn't cry, and she didn't shake, and she didn't get up. She sat there, and she let the truth of the last 20 minutes settle over her like dust settling on a surface that had been undisturbed for a long, long time. And then, slowly, she pulled the Ferreira file toward her, and she opened it, and she started to read because that was what she did. She worked. She kept her hands still. She built her life out of small, clean, correct actions, one at a time, until they added up to a day, and the day added up to a week, and the week added up to the life she had made. Except now, for the first time in 7 years, there was a second life walking around underneath it, and it was starting to look out from behind her eyes. Outside her window, a gull wheeled over the harbor. Somewhere on the 44th floor, Adrienne DeLuca was making phone calls she did not want to know about. Somewhere in Porto, a woman who had tried to poison her against the only man she had ever wanted was waking up to a problem she had not yet realized she had. Somewhere in Queens, under a gray stone, a man who had taught Adrian how to be a man was sleeping the long sleep, and whatever he had wanted for his nephew, it probably wasn't this. Lena looked down at the Ferreira numbers. She wrote a note in the margin. Her handwriting was neat. Her pen did not shake. She got through the day. That night, at 10:15, Mr. Rienzi walked her from the lobby of her building to the door of her apartment, said good night, Miss Hart, and then went and sat in a sedan across the street and did not leave until morning. Lena stood on the other side of her apartment door for a long time. She listened for his car. She did not hear it go. She turned off the lights. She got into bed. She picked up her phone. She did not text him. She put the phone face down on the nightstand, and she closed her eyes, and she did not sleep for a long time. But she did not cry either, and that, for a woman like Lena Hart, on the second night of the rest of her life, was something. She didn't sleep much that first night with Mr. Rienzi's sedan parked across the street, and she didn't sleep much the second night either, and by the third night she had figured out that the trick was to stop trying. She lay in bed with the light off and her eyes open, and she listened to the sounds of the city, the hiss of a bus, the distant shout of someone outside a bar on Columbus, the sigh of the old pipes in her building. And she let herself think, for the first time in 7 years, about what it would actually look like if she were allowed to want what she wanted. The thinking did not go well. Her imagination, it turned out, had atrophied. She could think of 1,000 versions of a work crisis, 1,000 versions of a board meeting, 1,000 versions of a press release. Her brain was a building full of filing cabinets, and all of them were labeled in his handwriting. But she could not, it turned out, imagine what it would look like to sit across from him at a table with bad lighting and order a glass of wine. She tried. She kept tripping over the part where he looked at her. In her imagination, every time he looked at her, she dropped her fork. It went on like that for a week. The work got done. Mr. Rienzi was always 3 steps behind her, polite as a Jesuit, invisible in the way only the very good ones are. Adrian was in and out of the building. He was gone 12 hours one day. Newark, then a flight, she didn't ask. And back at 7 the next morning, looking like a man who had slept in a chair. He stopped by her office twice a day, sometimes 3 times, never for long. He didn't sit. He didn't close the door. He kept his hands in his pockets. He said things like, "I pushed Tokyo to Friday. Can you get Hirota on the phone? And I need you in the 2 o'clock with legal." And he said her name the same way he'd always said it. Lena. No weight on it at all. No color. And then, at the very end, always, just before he left, he'd give her a look that lasted about half a second longer than it needed to. And that look carried everything, every bit of it. The elevator, the office, the words, "The woman I love." She'd feel it land in her chest like a second heartbeat, and then he'd be gone. And she'd put her hand on her desk, and she'd keep working. On Thursday, she stopped by his office at the end of the day because she had a document she needed him to sign and because Priya had gone home and there was no one left to carry it up for her. He was standing at the window, on the phone, speaking Italian, very fast, very low. She stood in the doorway. He saw her. He held up one finger, 1 minute, and went on. She watched him, not because she meant to, just because she was tired and he was there. His jacket was off. His sleeves were pushed up. There was a line of tension running from the base of his neck down the back of his shoulder, visible through the shirt, and she thought, irrelevantly, absurdly, that she had never once, in 7 years, put her hand on him. He said something sharp into the phone in Italian and hung up. "Sorry. Everything okay?" "No." He didn't elaborate. She didn't push. She walked over to his desk, put the document down, put a pen beside it. He came around, read it without sitting, signed it, handed it back. "Thank you." "Lena." "Yes." "Are you eating?" She almost laughed. "What?" "Are you eating? Priya says you didn't have lunch today." "Priya is a rat. Priya is doing her job." "I had a granola bar." "A granola bar is not lunch." It was a big granola bar. He gave her a look, half exasperated, half something else, and opened his desk drawer and pulled out a white paper bag and set it on the desk. "What's that?" "Dinner." "Adrian, I'm not asking you to eat it with me. I'm asking you to take it home and eat it. There's a soup, there's bread, there's one of those rice things your friend Priya said you like. I don't know what it's called. I got it from the place on 29th. If you don't eat it, I will find out from your doorman whether you threw it away." "You can't bribe my doorman." "I absolutely can bribe your doorman." "Adrian, Lena." She looked at the bag, then at him. He wasn't smiling. He was standing on the other side of his desk with his hands in his pockets and his tie half loose and a look on his face that she couldn't read, except that there was a small thread of please running under it that he wasn't going to say out loud, and she didn't have the heart to pretend she didn't see it. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me. I'm thanking you." "You're welcome." She picked up the bag. It was warm. He watched her pick it up. He watched her tuck it under her arm. He did not come around the desk. He did not walk her to the door. He stayed exactly where he was, and when she got to the doorway, she turned and looked back, and he was still watching her, and for a second, for one clean second, she almost crossed the room and put her mouth on his, because she was tired, and she was scared, and she was 24 all over again at a reception desk, and then the second passed. She nodded. He nodded. She left. She ate the soup at her kitchen counter at 11 o'clock. It was butternut squash. There was a little container of olive oil on the side with rosemary in it. She ate the bread, both pieces, over the sink, and she didn't cry because she had run out of crying for a while. But she sat on her kitchen floor for a few minutes afterward with her back against the cabinets, and she let herself feel how long it had been since someone had thought about whether she had eaten lunch. It had been a long time. It had been, approximately, her entire adult life. On Friday, she came in to work, and the building had the wrong temperature, not physically. That thing it had done on the day with Camille, the breath-held feeling, the stopped short conversations, it was back, but worse, and it was everywhere, from the lobby up. Marcus didn't make eye contact. Priya was already at her desk at 7, which was less an early start than a decision, and she had her coat still draped on the back of her chair like she wasn't sure she was going to be staying. "What happened?" Lena said. "Ben's in the hospital." Lena stopped halfway into her office. "What?" "He was on his way home last night. Someone on a scooter, they think a scooter, came up behind him on the corner of 3rd and 52nd and just clipped him hard. He went down. His head hit the curb. He's at Lenox Hill. It's a concussion. He's going to be fine." "But Lena." "What?" "It wasn't an accident." "How do you know?" "Because whoever it was got off the scooter and kicked him in the ribs 3 times before they got back on and rode away." Lena stood very still. "Has anyone told Adrian?" "I tried. He's on a flight. He'll land at 11. "Where from?" "I don't know. He's got somebody rerouting him. Mr. Rienzi knows." "Get Mr. Rienzi on the phone." Mr. Rienzi was, as it turned out, in the lobby of the building reading a newspaper. He came up to 42 within 4 minutes. He sat down in the chair in front of Lena's desk, and he put the newspaper on his knee, folded, neat, like a man who is used to carrying a folded newspaper for a reason. And he said quietly, "Miss Hart, Ben is going to be fine." "Good." "I saw him this morning." "You did?" "I was there when he woke up. He asked me to bring you the document." "What document?" Mr. Rienzi pulled a sealed envelope out from inside his jacket and placed it on the desk. It was the memo, the one she had asked Ben to write up the week before. The summary of both her conversations with Camille. Stamped, witnessed, signed, a copy. "He finished it Tuesday," Mr. Rienzi said. "He was carrying the original back to the compliance office last night. He does not, unfortunately, remember whether he was carrying it on him at the time of the incident." Lena looked at the envelope. She looked up at Rienzi. "Was he?" "No," Rienzi said gently. "It was in his bag. His bag was found beside him. The bag was open. The document was not in the bag. The rest of the contents of the bag were." She sat back. "Okay," she said very quietly. "Yes," Rienzi said. "She knows I went to compliance. It would seem. Does she know it was about her? She will now, if she did not." "Okay." Rienzi folded his newspaper a second time, smaller. "Miss Hart, I am going to ask you something, and I would like you to answer honestly. Are you willing to leave this city for 2 weeks? No. Mr. DeLuca will ask you. I will tell him no. He thought you would. Then he is not going to waste the plane ticket." Rienzi's mouth moved at one corner, the faintest ghost of approval. "Yes, miss. What else does he want me to do? He wants you to go home tonight at 6. He wants you to not stop anywhere on the way. He wants you to let me walk you in. He wants you to pack a small bag. He wants you to stay in your apartment this weekend, and he wants you to do that with your front door locked and your phone charged and me outside. He does not want you in this building tomorrow or Sunday. He does not want you in a restaurant, in a park, in a cab by yourself. He wants you at home, doing laundry, watching television, not alone but not out. He will be on the continent until Sunday night. He will call you when he lands. That is what he wants. Okay?" He said if you argued with any of it, I should tell you that he is asking. "He doesn't have to ask, Mr. Rienzi." "I know, miss. He said to tell you anyway." She nodded. She looked at the envelope. She picked it up. She slid it into her desk drawer and locked the drawer, and she looked at Mr. Rienzi again, and she said, "He's doing something, isn't he, this weekend? That's why he's not here." Rienzi's face did not change at all. "Miss Hart," he said, "I do not know what Mr. DeLuca is doing this weekend." "Mr. Rienzi." "I do not know, miss. You're a terrible liar." On the contrary, miss, he said, with the first real flicker of something like a smile, I am an excellent liar. That is why I know I should not try today. He stood up. He tucked the folded newspaper under his arm. 6 o'clock, Miss Hart, he said. Not a minute later. Okay. He left. At noon, Adrian called from a car. She could tell he was in a car. There was the low hum of a highway under his voice. Tell me. I'm fine. Ben's fine. Priya's fine. The memo. Safe. I have a copy. Good. Adrian? Yes. Are you coming back tonight? A pause. No. Monday. Monday. Where are you? Lena. I know, I'm asking anyway. She heard him breathe out through his nose. I'm going to see some people, he said. I'm going to be very polite with them. Nobody is going to get hurt. I'm going to come home Sunday night. I'm going to take you to dinner Tuesday. I'm going to keep it together until Tuesday. Can you keep it together until Tuesday? Yes. I'll call you tonight. Okay. Lena. Yes. You're... He stopped. Yes, she said. I know. Okay. He hung up. The weekend was quiet. Quiet in the way a waiting room is quiet. She did her laundry. She cleaned the kitchen. She rearranged one small corner of her living room that had been annoying her for 6 months, and then she put it back because the new arrangement was worse. She read half of a novel and then put it down because she kept getting to the ends of paragraphs and realizing she had not absorbed a single word. Mr. Rienzi was outside. Sometimes he was in a sedan. Sometimes a younger man was in the sedan and Rienzi was in the lobby, drinking coffee from the deli on the corner and reading, always, a folded newspaper. Her doorman seemed to like him. Her doorman's opinion of people was famously unreliable, but she felt, in a small, dim way, comforted anyway. Adrian called at 10 p.m. Saturday. She was on her couch. She didn't get up. Hi. Hi? Where are you? In a hotel. Not telling you what city. That's fair? How are you? I rearranged my couch cushions. How did that go? I put them back. He laughed. It was a short, tired laugh, like a man laughing for the first time in 3 days. I miss you, he said. She closed her eyes. Don't, she said. Too late. Adrian. Sorry. No, It's not... She held the phone harder. It's not that I don't want you to say it. It's that if you say it, I am going to cry. And I have spent 3 days not crying, and I would like to keep not crying for another 48 hours. Understood. Are you okay? Yes. Are you lying? Slightly. Okay. They didn't say anything for a minute. She could hear his breath. She could hear, under it, a faint music from another room somewhere. On his end, a piano in a lounge maybe, some old slow song. She listened to it. He listened to her listen to it. Lena. Yes. I'll see you Tuesday. Tuesday. Go to bed. Okay. She stayed on the phone with him, though, for another 2 minutes without talking. She didn't hang up. He didn't hang up. Both of them just listening to the other one breathe. And then, finally, she said, Good night, Adrian. And he said, Good night, Lena. And they hung up at the exact same second. He came back on Sunday at 11. He texted her, home, safe, sleep. She texted back a thumbs up because she did not trust herself with words. She slept, for the first time in a week, really slept. And she woke up at 6 to a city that looked from her window like it had been washed. Monday was work. There was, in fact, a frightening amount of work. The Ferreira team came back. The Tokyo call happened. Ben, from his hospital bed, sent a 3-page memo that was sharper than half the memos he'd sent her while standing up, and Lena read it twice and then emailed him a single line that said, Please never get hit by a scooter again. I missed you. The Friday filing is on my desk. Rest. And he wrote back, We'll try on all counts. Camille, she was informed by Priya in a whisper over coffee, had left the country on Saturday. To where, no one had been told. The story inside the family, Rienzi informed her in his gentle courtly way in the hallway that afternoon, was that Camille was on a retreat. The word was used, he said, in the same tone of voice one might use to describe a rehabilitation facility. Is she coming back? That is her choice, miss. Is it really? Yes, he said. It is really her choice. Mr. DeLuca is very careful about that. He will not make the choice for her. He will, however, make the consequences of her choice extremely clear. And Kowalski? Rienzi looked at her for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, Miss Hart, some things happened this weekend that are not for you to carry. Mr. Rienzi, please, miss. If you never ask me again, I will be grateful. I will also answer, if you insist, but I would like you to not insist. She didn't insist. She went back to her office. She worked. At the end of the day, Adrian stopped in. He stood in the doorway with his jacket on and his tie straight, and he looked, for the first time in a week, like a man who had slept. Tomorrow night, he said. Tomorrow night. 7? I'll send a car. Where? A place on 54th. You've never been. Neither have I. The lighting is bad and the waiter doesn't know either of our names. Okay. Wear whatever you want. I was going to wear what I'm wearing. Wear whatever you want, Lena. Okay. He almost smiled. She almost smiled. The door stayed open. He left. Tuesday night, she wore a navy dress she had bought in a boutique in Greenwich 3 years ago and had never not once taken out of the closet. She put her hair down. She put on the lipstick, and this time she did not take it off. The car came at 6:40. Mr. Rienzi was in the front. A different driver was behind the wheel. They did not speak. She sat in the back with her hands folded in her lap, and she felt, for the first time in years, afraid in a way that was not about work, afraid like a teenager, afraid like a girl. And the feeling was humiliating, and it was also, in a quiet way, a relief, because it was evidence that she was still capable of being a person. The restaurant was on the top floor of a building she had walked past 1,000 times and never gone into. Narrow staircase, small room, 9 tables, candles. He was already there, at a table by the window, and he stood up when she came in, and he looked at her, and she looked at him. And it turned out that the fork thing she had been afraid of in her imagination didn't happen, because he walked over and took her coat and did not touch her except to brush her hair, very briefly, off the back of her collar, and she sat down, and she did not drop anything. They talked for 2.5 hours. Not about work. Not about Camille. Not about Kowalski. She told him about the diner in New Jersey. He told her about his mother. He told her the real version, the version where his mother had been angry at him for 2 years before she died because he had moved to America without asking her first, and she had withheld her forgiveness on purpose for most of that time. And in the last month she had given it to him in pieces, one at a time, like a woman rationing a loaf of bread. He said he had not told anyone that story, not even his brother. She said she believed him. He told her he had been a bad son, and she said, "You were a young son." And he looked at her for a long second and said, "Lena," and then he didn't say anything else, and neither did she. And they ate, and the waiter didn't know their names, and the lighting was bad, and it was, she thought later, in bed, the first dinner of her life. He did not try to kiss her that night. He walked her to the car. He opened the door. He said, "Good night," and he closed the door, and she rode home alone with Mr. Rienzi in the front, and her cheeks hurt from smiling, and she thought, okay. This is the part where it gets better. This is the part where the world gets bigger. That was Tuesday. On Friday, 9 days later, 9 dinners later, 9 nights of Rienzi sitting across the street later, she stopped at a small bodega 2 blocks from her office on her lunch break because she wanted a piece of gum and a bottle of water. She had told Rienzi she'd be gone 8 minutes. She was not, in hindsight, gone 8 minutes. She was gone 12. She had stopped on the corner for a minute to look at a dog. A small, ridiculous dog, with a coat on, waiting outside the bodega for its owner. And she had laughed, for a second, at the dog. And in that second, 2 men came up on either side of her, and one of them put a hand on the small of her back, and the other put something small and hard against her ribs under her coat. And the first one said, in a voice that was almost kind, "Miss Hart, please don't scream. There's a car right here. If you get in the car quietly, nobody on this street has a bad day. Do you understand?" She understood. She got in the car. It happened that fast. It happened in the middle of the afternoon, on Lexington Avenue, in front of 8 people, none of whom looked up. A black SUV with tinted windows, a back seat that smelled like leather and somebody else's cologne. 2 men in the front, 1 man in the back beside her, the one with the kind voice. They pulled away from the curb without hurry. The one next to her held out his hand, palm up. "Your phone, miss." She gave him her phone. "Your earrings." She gave him her earrings. "Your handbag." She gave him her handbag. He did not go through the handbag. He set it on the floor at his feet. He did not touch her again. He looked out the window. He had, she noticed, very clean fingernails. She noticed it because her brain had, as brains sometimes do in the first seconds of an emergency, decided to go very still and very particular. She was not screaming. She was not crying. She was noticing the man's fingernails and the stitching on the seat, and the fact that the driver was chewing a piece of gum, and the fact that there was a rosary hanging from the rearview mirror, which seemed like a bleak joke to hang in this particular car. She thought distantly, oh, this is what this feels like. Oh, okay. The man next to her turned his head a little and spoke, not to her, into a small device clipped to his lapel. "We have her." There was a pause. Some reply she couldn't hear. "Yes." Another pause. "Yes." He turned back to her. "Miss Hart," he said politely, "I'm sorry for the inconvenience. This is going to be approximately 2 hours of driving. We are not going to hurt you. You are valuable to us only in that you are valuable to Mr. DeLuca. We are going to make a phone call in a few minutes. He's going to be asked to come meet you. He will come. When he comes, you will be released. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good. You are being very calm. That is helpful. Would you like some water?" "No." "All right." He turned back to the window. She sat in the back of the SUV in her navy coat with her hands folded in her lap, and she watched the city move past the window. She saw the corner of 61st. She saw the bridge. She saw the bridge going under her. She saw the hard gray water of the East River. And she did the math. It was 12:42 when she had looked at her watch in the bodega. They had been in the car about 6 minutes. That put them at 12:48. Rienzi was across the street from her office. He was going to figure out something was wrong in, she tried to be generous, 4 more minutes, tops. Adrian was in a meeting on 44. He was going to know within 10. Once he knew, the phone call the kind-voiced man had mentioned was going to be, for him, the worst phone call of his life. And she thought about that, in the back of the SUV, and for the first time since she'd gotten in the car, she felt her throat tighten, because she understood that the worst thing about being the person taken was not what it was going to do to her. She was, it turned out, not that scared for herself. She was scared for him. She was scared for Adrian DeLuca. She was scared that he was going to get the phone call, and he was going to hear her voice, and he was going to come. Of course he was going to come. There had never been a second in the last 3 weeks in which he was not going to come. And they were not going to let him walk out of wherever they were taking her. And she was going to have to watch him do something, or have something done to him, that he had been working for 12 years to keep out of his life. She thought about the elevator. She thought about his face in the elevator when he had said, "I have been trying every single day for 7 years to be enough for you." She thought about the soup, the bread, the rice thing, his hand brushing her hair off the collar of her coat at the restaurant, his voice on the phone from the hotel. "I miss you, don't, too late." She thought, I have not told him yet. She had not told him yet. She had been waiting. She had been waiting for a Tuesday. She had been waiting for bad lighting and a waiter. She had been waiting for it to be perfect. She had been waiting, like a child, for permission from the universe to say the one thing that was the most true thing about her, and the universe, it turned out, was not a patient parent. The car crossed another bridge. She didn't know which one. She thought it was the Triborough. She wasn't sure. The kind-voiced man handed her a phone. "Miss Hart," he said, "it's time." He pressed a button. The phone started to dial. Adrian's private number. The one only 6 people in the world had. She watched the screen. It rang twice. "Lena." His voice was so calm that she almost, in spite of everything, smiled. It was the voice he used on boards. It was the voice he used when the worst thing in the world was happening in the next room. It was the voice that meant, "I am going to fix this. Tell me the shape of it." "Adrian, Are you hurt? No. Are you in a car? Yes. How many men? The kind-voiced man shook his head once, just once. The gesture was gentle. Don't answer that. I can't, she said. I can't. It's okay. That's okay. I have you. I have you. Lena, listen to me. I love you. I want you to know that right now, in this exact minute, because I should have said it 3 weeks ago and I waited. And I want you to know I was not going to wait to say it again. I love you. Do you understand me? She couldn't speak. Lena? Yes. Yes, me too. Say it. I love you. Again. I love you, Adrian. Good. Good girl. Okay, now put the man on the phone. She handed the phone back. The kind-voiced man took it. He listened. His face did not change. He said, in the same polite tone, "We will text an address. You come alone, or we release her in a place she does not want to be released in. 1 hour." He hung up. He handed her phone back to her, turned off. He put it on the seat between them. He looked at her with what she realized, with a wave of something so cold it felt hot, was sympathy. "Miss Hart," he said, "you are very calm." "Yes." "May I ask, is this your first time?" She laughed. She didn't mean to. It came out high and wrong, and she clapped her hand over her mouth. The man did not react. He looked out the window. "Yes," she said, when she could. "It's my first time." "Ah," he said. "You are doing very well?" They drove. She watched the city become not the city. Warehouses, then water again, then a low road between 2 fences, and she thought, underneath the math and the fear and the cold sweat on the back of her neck, one clear thing. One clear thing that would stay with her through the next 3 hours, through the warehouse with the folding chair she would sit on without complaint, through the single crack in the kind-voiced man's calm when somebody on the radio used the word helicopter, through the moment the door at the far end of the warehouse opened, and every man in the room turned to face it, through the moment, an hour and 17 minutes later, when she saw Adrian DeLuca walk into the warehouse without a tie, without a weapon she could see, with his hands empty and open and held out from his sides, with Mr. Rienzi behind him, and a man she had never seen behind Rienzi, with a look on his face she would remember for the rest of her life, which was the look of a man who had decided, on the ride over, exactly which version of himself was going to walk out of this room. Through all of it, there was one clear thing. She had said it. She had said the word. He had too. On the phone. In a voice she had never heard him use with anyone. He had said it to her before he came because he had understood, in the second he heard her voice, that if he did not say it before he came, there was a universe in which he did not get to say it at all. He had refused that universe. He had burned it down before he walked out the door. He had said "I love you" to her on a line that 4 men were probably listening to, and he had said it without hedging and without lowering his voice, and he had made her say it back, because he was not going to let her live the next hour without having given herself that one thing. Later, much later, when it was all over, when the warehouse was empty and the cars had gone and she was sitting in the back of a different car, his car, with her head on his shoulder, his hand flat and warm against the back of her skull, his breath uneven against the top of her hair, she would think that the best thing he had ever done for her, and he had done by then a lot of good things for her, was that phone call. Not the rescue, not the men he brought, not the things he said later, in the car or in the hospital waiting room, where they made her sit for 4 hours because her blood pressure was a mess, or in her apartment 2 nights after that when he finally sat down on her couch and pulled her against him and did not move, did not try anything, did not do anything at all except hold her while she shook and shook and shook for the first time since it had happened. The best thing he had ever done for her was the phone call, because in the phone call, before she knew if she was going to see him again, he had made sure she knew. And on the drive to the warehouse, with a stranger's clean fingernails in her peripheral vision and the water of the East River fading out of the window, Lena Hart, who had kept her hands still for 12 years, who had built a life out of small, clean, correct actions, who had loved a man without permission for 7 years, 2 months, and by now considerably more than 11 days, sat in the back of a black SUV, and she did not cry, and she did not pray, and she did not beg, and she did not think about dying. She thought about the next dinner, The warehouse had no name on it. It was the kind of building a person drove past 1,000 times without ever once thinking about it. Low, brick, a rusted sign for a shipping company that had gone out of business in 1994, a loading dock with weeds growing out of the concrete. The kind-voiced man took her out of the SUV with one hand lightly under her elbow, the way an usher leads a woman down a church aisle. He walked her through a side door. Inside, the building was mostly empty and mostly dark, with a few yellow lights hanging from the rafters and a single folding chair set in the middle of the floor about 30 feet from the far door. Someone had even brought a bottle of water and set it on the floor next to the chair. She sat down. The kind-voiced man stood 3 feet behind her. 2 other men stood at the far door. 2 more were somewhere behind her, out of sight. She did not turn to look. She kept her hands in her lap. She counted her breaths. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. She had been sitting on the chair for 49 minutes. She had counted, in her head, against the ticking of a water pipe somewhere, when the kind-voiced man touched his ear and said softly, "He's here." And then the door at the far end of the warehouse opened, and Adrian walked in. He was not alone. Rienzi was at his left shoulder, in the gray wool coat he wore in every weather, holding a manila envelope. Behind Rienzi there was a man she had never seen. Thin, 60s, close-cropped white hair, a face like a small axe. And behind that man, at an almost respectful distance, 2 more men in dark jackets, empty hands, walking with the particular looseness of people who had been told, on the drive over, to keep their hands visible and their mouths shut. Adrian himself was in a black coat over a white shirt open at the collar. No tie. His hands were at his sides, empty, palms half turned out. He did not walk fast. He walked at the pace a man walks into a church or a hospital room. He did not look at her at first. He looked at the man standing behind her. He kept his eyes there all the way across the warehouse. "Mr. Bregman," he said when he was 15 feet away, "thank you for being careful with her." "Mr. DeLuca." "May I?" He tipped his head slightly toward her chair. The kind-voiced man, Bregman, considered him for a second, then nodded once. Adrian walked the last 15 feet. He came around the chair. He crouched, so his eyes were level with hers, and he did not touch her. He took in her face. He took in her coat, buttoned wrong, she realized now. He took in her hands. "Lena." "I'm okay." "Are you?" "Yes." "Say something only you would say." She almost laughed. The hysteria was right there, waiting. She pushed it back. "You paid my doorman $40 last Tuesday to tell you whether I ate the rice thing." His eyes closed, very briefly. When they opened, they were wet. "It was 50. He's a crook." "Adrian?" "Yes." "Please do whatever you need to do, and then please take me home." "Okay." He stood up. He turned. He faced Bregman. The warehouse went very still. "I'd like to speak to whoever's in charge," Adrian said. "That's not going to happen today, Mr. DeLuca." "Understood. Then I'd like you to carry a message. Are you ready to carry a message?" "I am. Tell him that I brought what I said I would bring." He gestured without looking, and Rienzi stepped forward and held out the manila envelope. Bregman took it. He didn't open it. He waited in his hand for a second and then tucked it under his arm, and Adrian went on as if the transaction had not interrupted him. "Tell him the other 2 things he asked for will be at the address we discussed at 4 p.m. today. Tell him that I kept my word on all 3 items, and that I expect him to keep his word on the 1 item we agreed on. Her, unharmed, tonight." "Agreed." "And Mr. Bregman?" "Yes. Tell him one more thing, not from DeLuca, from me, personally. Tell him that I am a very patient man and that I have demonstrated that patience today in this warehouse, in a way that he and I are both going to remember for the rest of our lives. Tell him that I am willing to do this once. Tell him that if a man on a scooter, or a man in a car, or a man on a corner, or anyone he has ever met in his life or ever will meet, lays a hand on her again, or on her friend, or on her assistant, or on the doorman of her building, or on the man who sells her coffee, I will not be patient a second time. Tell him I will not send Mr. Rienzi. I will not send a lawyer. I will not send an envelope. Tell him I will come personally, and I will bring every resource my family has spent 60 years building in this country, and I will not stop until there is nothing left of him to find. Do you understand the message, Mr. Bregman? do. Repeat the last part. You will come personally. You will not stop. Good. Adrian did not raise his voice at any point. He did not step forward. His hands were still loose at his sides. But Bregman, a man who she would learn later had been doing this kind of work for 22 years and had a reputation in certain circles for finding almost nothing in the world frightening, Bregman shifted his weight very slightly onto his back foot. It was the smallest movement Lena had ever seen a grown man make. She watched it. She understood in that moment something about Adrian DeLuca that she had, in 7 years of loving him, half known and never named. He had been a certain kind of man once, before he decided to stop being it. He had not forgotten how. We're leaving now, Mr. Bregman, Adrian said, gentler. We're leaving with her. Is that going to be a problem? No. Thank you. He turned. He held his hand out to Lena. She took it. She stood. Her knees were not, as it turned out, as strong as she had thought they were, and she swayed for a second, and he caught her around the waist, and he did not look at Bregman again. They walked her out of the warehouse together. Rienzi first, Adrian's arm around her shoulders, the man with the axe face behind them, the other two bringing up the rear. And no one in the warehouse moved until they were at the door. Lena did not look back. Adrian did not let her look back. Outside, the light was still the wrong color. Late afternoon, a gray flat color that was neither day nor evening. And there were 3 black cars along the fence, and Rienzi opened the door of the middle one, and Adrian put her in the back seat and got in beside her and shut the door, and the car started moving before the door had finished closing. She did not cry. She did not speak. She sat with her hands in her lap, and she looked straight ahead at the headrest of the driver's seat, and she counted 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. Adrian did not touch her. He kept his hands in his own lap. He watched her out of the corner of his eye, and he waited. They were on the bridge going back into the city before she spoke. Adrian. Yes. What was in the envelope? He didn't answer right away. Names, he said finally, of men who did business with Kowalski over the last 3 years. Some of them are men Kowalski would prefer. The government didn't know he had ever met. It is leverage, Lena. Nothing more. Nobody got hurt. Nobody was going to get hurt. I handed him the only thing he was ever going to accept in exchange for you, which was a piece of paper that makes it slightly less safe for him to breathe in this country for the next 12 months. Okay? And the other 2 things will be at the address at 4. They are also pieces of paper, also leverage, also not people. Okay? Lena. Yes. I did not hurt anybody today. I want you to know that. I did not hurt anybody, and nobody on my side hurt anybody on his side, and I am not going to lie to you later and tell you that I did something different. I made a deal. I kept the deal. I walked out. That is what happened. Okay? I almost didn't, he said very quietly. I almost did something else. On the drive over. I sat in the car for about 6 minutes on the way, and I had a long conversation with myself about what kind of man I was going to be when I walked into that warehouse. I had Mr. Rienzi, and I had the men you just saw. And I had 3 other cars you didn't see, and I had other resources I am not going to describe. And I sat in the car and I thought very seriously, for 6 minutes, about going in with all of it. And it would have worked. And some people in the warehouse would be dead, and I would be a different person for the rest of my life. And you would know it. And I thought about what your face would look like 6 months from now, or a year, or 5, when you figured out what I had done, which you would figure out, because you are the smartest person in any room you walk into. And I decided I would rather walk in with an envelope. He let out a breath. So that is what I did. She turned her head. She looked at him. Adrian? Yes. Thank you. He did not say you're welcome. He put his head back against the seat, and he closed his eyes, and she watched a single tear come out from under the lashes of his right eye and slide down into his hairline without ever touching his cheek. And she reached over, finally, and she put her hand over his hand on the seat between them, and he turned his palm up and closed his fingers around hers and did not open his eyes for the rest of the drive. They did not go to her apartment. They went to a hospital, not Lenox Hill, a smaller one, a private one, off the park, where a doctor who knew Rienzi by his first name was waiting for them in a quiet room on the 4th floor. The doctor was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and warm hands, and she asked Lena to sit on the edge of the examining bed, and she checked her blood pressure and her pulse and her pupils and the back of her neck and her wrists and her ankles. Her blood pressure was a mess. Her pulse was high. Her pupils were fine. There were no bruises on her wrists, on her ankles, anywhere. The doctor was very gentle. She asked, in a low voice, whether anyone had touched Lena. Lena said no. The doctor asked her to say it again and looked her in the eyes when she said it. Lena said no again. The doctor nodded and said, "Good. Okay. Good." And then the doctor gave her something small and white to put under her tongue and told her it was going to make her sleepy and that was what she wanted and that Adrian was going to be right outside the door and they were not going to leave her alone for a second. She slept for 4 hours on a bed in a private hospital room with Adrian in a chair by the door and Rienzi in a chair in the hallway and a nurse checking on her every 20 minutes. And when she woke up, it was dark and Adrian was still in the chair and he had not moved. And the only thing different about him was that his collar was unbuttoned one more button. "Hi," she said. "Hi. What time?" 11:15. "Okay." She sat up slowly. He stood up, came to the bed, sat on the edge of it. He put his hand on the side of her face. It was the first time he had touched her face with his bare hand in 7 years, 2 months. And she would have done the math, but she was too tired, and she turned her cheek into his palm and closed her eyes and cried, finally, for about 3 minutes, not hard, just steady, while he sat there with his hand against her cheek and didn't speak. When she was done, he gave her a tissue from the box on the nightstand. She blew her nose. She laughed, once, small and wet. He almost smiled. "Take me home," she said. "Okay." He drove her home himself. Not his car, not Rienzi's. A plain sedan she had never seen before. He drove one-handed, the other hand loosely around hers across the console, and he didn't talk, and he didn't play music. And when they got to her building, he parked in the loading zone out front, and her doorman, Freddie, who was usually asleep at 11 at night, was awake in a way that meant he had been waiting, and Freddie opened the car door for her and said, "Miss Hart," in a voice like he was going to cry, and she reached out and squeezed his arm and said, "I'm okay, Freddie, I'm okay." And she could hear Adrian behind her saying something quiet to Freddie, and she couldn't make out the words, but she heard Freddie say, "Yes, sir. Of course, sir. Thank you, sir." And she understood distantly that her doorman had been on Adrian's payroll for longer than she had realized. Upstairs in her apartment, Adrian did not turn on the lights. He shut the door behind them, double-locked it, walked through each room, bedroom, bathroom, closet, kitchen, the little alcove by the window, methodically, without theater, then came back to the living room and finally stopped. He stood in the middle of her rug with his coat still on and his hands at his sides, and he looked at her. "Lena." "Yeah." "Can I hold you?" "Yes." He took her in his arms, gently, not tightly, as if she were made of something breakable, and she put her face into the front of his shirt, and she stood there. And she breathed, and he breathed, and they stood in her living room like that for a long time, not moving, not talking, her hands fisted in the wool of his coat, his chin against the top of her head. At some point, without her noticing exactly when, she started shaking. Not crying, just shaking. A fine, fast tremor that started in her shoulders and ran down through her arms into his coat. He didn't say anything. He didn't try to make it stop. He just held on until it did. When it did, he said, "Do you want me to stay?" I don't know if I... "Lena, I'm not asking you anything. I'm asking if you want me to sleep on your couch." "Oh, I will sleep on the couch. I will go home. I will sit in the hallway outside your door. You tell me." She didn't answer for a minute. Then she said, into his shirt, "Couch." Couch it is. He slept on her couch. He was too tall for it. He did not take off his clothes, only his coat and his shoes. She gave him a pillow and a blanket from the linen closet, and he said, "Thank you." Like she had handed him the keys to a hotel room, and she went into her bedroom and she lay down in her own bed in her own clothes. She could not yet make herself undress. And she left her bedroom door open a foot, and she listened to him breathe from across the apartment, and for the first time in a week she slept all the way through the night without waking. In the morning he was up before her, drinking coffee in her kitchen, making phone calls in a low voice in Italian. He had bought coffee, apparently, from somewhere. There was a paper bag on the counter with 2 pastries in it. He ended the call when she came in. He looked at her over the rim of the cup. She was in an old t-shirt and sweatpants, and her hair was up in a knot, and she had washed her face, and she had, on some deep animal level, finally stopped being afraid. He saw it on her. She saw him see it. Neither of them said anything about it. Pastry? Okay. They ate at her counter, standing up. When they were done, he said, I have to go to the office for a few hours. I want you to not come in today. I want you to not come in tomorrow. I want you to not come in for the rest of the week. I want you to rest. I want you to read a book or watch a movie or sleep. Mr. Rienzi will be in the lobby. Mrs. Alvarez from down the hall. Mrs. Alvarez has agreed to check on you at noon and at 4. She has my number. Your friend Priya is going to come by at 6 with dinner. If you do not want any of these people to come, you tell them so and they won't. I'm going to come by tonight around 9. If at 9 you tell me you want to be alone, I will go home and you will not see me again until you ask to see me. Is any of this unreasonable? No. Good. Adrian? Yes. You're bossy. He almost laughed. I know. I don't hate it. I know that too. He kissed her forehead, the first kiss of any kind, and it was as chaste as a priest's blessing, and it landed like a nail. And he left. That week was strange. It was in some ways the strangest week of her life, because on the outside nothing much happened. She slept. She ate. She sat by her window and watched the park turn one more shade toward winter. Priya came by every evening, and on the second night Priya cried quietly in Lena's kitchen for about 90 seconds, and then wiped her face and said, I am never doing that again, so we don't have to talk about it. Do you want pad thai? And they ate pad thai on Lena's couch, and watched a movie neither of them paid attention to, and did not talk about the warehouse once. Mrs. Alvarez, who had lived down the hall for 11 years, and whose name Lena had vaguely known, and whose face Lena would not have picked out of a lineup a month before, turned out to be a 74-year-old widow with a strong opinion about eggs, and she checked on Lena twice a day that whole week and brought her, on Wednesday, a Tupperware of something she called picadillo, which was the single best thing Lena had eaten in a year. Mr. Rienzi was downstairs, always. Freddie, downstairs, always. The city did what the city did. Nobody touched her. Nobody watched her. Nothing bad happened. Adrian came over every night at 9. He did not stay over again after that first night. He came at 9 and left at 11. He sat on her couch. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. On Tuesday, he brought a box of photographs from a box his mother had left him, and he sat on the rug with his back against the couch. And he went through them one at a time and told her who everybody was. And some of the stories were funny, and some of them were sad. And one of them was about a summer his mother had spent in a small town on the coast of a country he described, when pressed, as not Italy exactly, a place next to Italy. And his face was younger while he talked about it than she had ever seen it, and she thought for the first time about the word home. Not hers. His. He had one. It was somewhere. She was going to see it eventually. He was going to take her there. On Wednesday, he brought Chinese food and ate half of it and did not talk much. And when she asked him what was wrong, he said, I spoke to my cousin today. And she put her chopsticks down. Camille. Yes? Where is she? She is at a house my family owns in the hills above a town I am not going to tell you the name of. She is not a prisoner. She is not free to leave. She spoke to me for 20 minutes today on a phone call that was recorded. She said, among other things, that she had not understood what Mr. Kowalski was planning to do. She said she had told him she would help him make contact with certain people in my organization and that she had accepted money from him. A lot of money. Lena. In exchange for information about my schedule and my contacts, and that she had believed when she did it that the worst thing that was going to happen was that Mr. Kowalski would use the information to embarrass my father at a negotiation next spring. She said she did not know. Did not she says no, that he was going to touch you. That when she heard that you had been taken, she called her mother, and her mother called my mother's brother, and an hour later she was on a plane. Meet. Do you believe her? He took a long time to answer. I believe, he said carefully, that she did not know, because I believe that she is not at heart, the kind of woman who would knowingly approve of what he did to you. I do not believe that that makes her less responsible for what he did to you. If she had not accepted his money a year and a half ago, he would not have been in a position to take you. Her ignorance of his plans does not give her back that year and a half. So what happens? She stays where she is until the family decides. She will not return to the United States. She will not, in my lifetime, set foot in the building she walked out of the week before last. Her husband, you don't know her husband, is flying out tomorrow to decide whether he goes with her or divorces her. Her son is 19 and is at school in London and is going to be told, by me, in person, next month. That is what happens. It is not what I would do if it were someone who was not family. If it were not family, Lena, I would... He stopped. He looked at his plate. I would do something different. I want you to know that I considered it. And I want you to know that I'm not going to do it. Because she is family. And because if I did, my mother would be ashamed of me. And I have been spending 11 years trying to not be ashamed of, and not do things that would be ashamed of, my mother. Okay? Lena. Yes. Are you angry? I don't know. Okay? Ask me again in a month. I will. On Friday he came at 9 and he sat on the couch and he looked at her for a long time without speaking, and she could tell he had something to say. She let him sit with it. Finally he said, I want to take you somewhere. Where? Home. My home. The other one. Where my mother's family is from. Adrian? Not now. In 2 weeks. 3 weeks. Whenever you feel strong enough, I want to take you there, and I want to show you the house, and I want to introduce you to 2 old women who raised me every summer from the time I was 4 until the time I was 17. I want you to see where my mother is buried, not the cemetery in Queens. That is my uncle. My mother is in a church in the hills. I want to take you there, and I want to tell you some things about my family that I think you should know before we go any further, and I would rather tell you them there than here. There are reasons for that. Some of them are practical. Some of them are sentimental. All of them are real. Okay? Yes? Yes, of course. Yes, when you say. Okay. He nodded. He looked down at his hands. Then he said, in a voice that was a shade more careful than the one he had been using with her all week, Lena. Yes. There is one more thing I want to say tonight, and I want to say it badly. And I want to not say it, because I promised you once I would not say it again until you asked, and you have not asked, and I am, all of a sudden, very bad at keeping my word. She took a breath. Adrian. Yes. Say it. I love you. I love you too. I'm going to say it a lot, he said. Starting now, starting tonight. You should know. I am going to say it in the morning, and I am going to say it at night, and I am going to say it when I hand you coffee. I have been storing it up for 7 years, and it is going to come out now. You are going to get very tired of it. I won't. You might. I won't. Okay. He reached out. He took her hand. He did not pull her in. He just held her hand, palm to palm, fingers laced, on the couch between them, and they sat like that for a long time without talking. And at 11, per the rule he had made for himself without telling her, he stood up and he put on his coat and he said, Good night, Lena Hart. And she said, Good night, Adrian DeLuca. And he left. The next morning, for the first time in a week, she went out. She walked to the coffee shop on the corner. Mr. Rienzi walked 10 feet behind her. The coffee shop was full of people who did not know her name, and she stood in line behind a man with a baby, and the baby looked at her over the man's shoulder, and she smiled at the baby, and the baby smiled back. She ordered a latte. She sat by the window. She watched the street. Nothing bad happened. A bus went by. A woman walked a small dog in a coat, possibly the same small dog from the bodega, possibly a cousin of that small dog. And the woman saw Lena in the window and smiled. Lena smiled back. Nothing bad happened. For the first time in 2 weeks, nothing bad happened and kept not happening, and Lena sat there with her hands around her cup, and she thought, okay, the world is going to let me have this. She went back to work on Monday. She did not make a production of it. She came in at 8:15, same as always. Priya looked up from her desk when she came in and did not make a production either. Just said, Hi, Coffee's on your desk. We have the Hirota call at 10. And Lena said, thanks, and went into her office. Ben stopped by at 10:30. He had a bandage over his left temple and a bruise turning yellow along his jaw, and he set a folder down on her desk and said, I heard you had a week. I heard you had a week. Yeah. We should go to lunch. We should go to lunch. She reached across the desk and squeezed his hand once, quickly, and he squeezed hers back, and then he left, because he was not, as she had always known, the kind of man who needed a scene. She did the Hirota call. She did a 2 o'clock with legal. She had a sandwich at her desk. At 4:15, Adrian stopped by. He stood in her doorway with his hands in his pockets, same as always, and looked at her for a half second too long, same as always. And he said, Are you ready to go home? And she said, Yes. And he said, Mine or yours? And for a second, just a second, she couldn't answer, because she had not, yet, been to his. And then she said, Mine. And he said, Okay. And he walked her down to the car, and that was the first night she slept badly again. She woke at 3:40 in the morning from a dream in which the kind-voiced man had been standing at the foot of her bed, politely holding out his hand for her earrings. She sat up. Her heart was pounding. She breathed. 4, 4, 4. And it did not work. She got up. She went into the living room. She sat on the couch. She did not turn on the lights. She looked out the window at the building across the street, at the 3 windows that were still lit even at this hour. An insomniac, a nurse coming off shift, a baby, and she picked up her phone and she called him. Lena. His voice was already awake. She had a brief, sharp, ridiculous thought that he had been waiting for this call. I had a dream. Okay. I don't want to be alone tonight. Give me 20 minutes. Adrian, 20 minutes. Go put the water on for tea and don't pick up the phone again unless it's me. I love you. I'll be there. He hung up. He was there in 18. He came in with his hair half flat from a pillow and a soft gray t-shirt under his coat and no socks on under his shoes. And he did not ask her what the dream had been, and he did not try to fix it. He took his coat off. He made her drink the tea. He sat on her couch with her, and he turned the television on low to some old black and white movie, and he put his arm around her, and he did not try anything, and he did not kiss her mouth. And when she put her head on his chest, he put his chin on top of her head, and he breathed, and his breathing was slow and long and even, and she realized after a little while that he was breathing that slowly on purpose for her to match, and she matched, and her pulse slowed, and the fear went down, and she slept on his chest like that for 3 hours with the movie talking softly at them in the dark. And when the skies started to turn gray, he carried her. He actually carried her, a thing she would never have allowed in her waking life, into her bedroom, and he put her in her bed, and he kissed her forehead, and he went to go sit on her couch until it was time for her to get up. She got up. She looked at him on her couch, asleep finally, with his feet hanging off the end because he was too tall for it, and she thought, this is a man, not a boss, not a project, not a dream. A man, with cold feet, asleep on a couch that did not fit him, because she had called him at 3:40 in the morning and said she didn't want to be alone. It was almost 2 full months before they slept in the same bed, and even then, the first night, they did not do anything but sleep. That was her decision. He did not argue with it. He held her in the dark in his apartment for the first time, and he said, into her hair, "Tell me if you want me to move." And she said, "Don't move." And he didn't, and she fell asleep with her forehead against his collarbone. And she woke up once in the night because he was not in bed, and she sat up, scared. She had not realized how scared until right that second, and she heard him in the kitchen, quietly, and saw the light under the door, and a minute later he came back with a glass of water for himself, and no explanation, and he got back in bed, and he said, "I'm here," and she said, "I know," and she put her head back down, and she slept for 5 more hours. He did not ask anything of her. He did not push. He never, ever pushed. And somewhere in there, in the slow days and the long nights and the mornings of coffee in his kitchen or hers, in the trip he had promised her, the one to the hills, the one to the church where his mother was buried, that they had not yet taken, in the meetings at the office, where he now sometimes put his hand at the small of her back as he walked her out of a conference room, and nobody, not Priya, not Ben, not Hirota, on a screen from Tokyo, said a word about it. In all of that, Lena Hart started, without noticing at first, to stop being afraid of her own life. Not all at once. Never all at once. That was not how it worked for a woman like her. It worked in small, slow, stubborn ways. One morning, she caught her own eye in the bathroom mirror and saw that her mouth was doing a thing she had not seen it do in possibly ever, which was the small, private smile of a woman who was thinking about somebody. One Friday night at his apartment, she laughed at something he said, and the laugh came out of her before she had a chance to check it, and she thought, oh, that was a real one. I haven't heard one of those in a while. One Sunday, she walked into the kitchen in one of his t-shirts and no pants, and her hair a disaster, and did not cover herself with her arms, and did not turn around and put on something else. And she reached past him for the coffee, and he said, "Good morning." And she said, "Good morning." And that was all. And she thought, oh, I am a person. I am a person standing in a kitchen. One Tuesday, he said something she didn't agree with about a hiring decision, and she said, no. And he said, what? And she said, no, you're wrong, and I'm going to tell you why. And she did, and she was right, and he listened, and he changed his mind, and when it was done, he said, I love you. Like a man making a small, grateful note in a book. And somewhere in there, she stopped counting. The 7 years, the 2 months, the 11 days. She had been counting them on the morning of the elevator, without knowing it, and she had kept counting them, secretly, every morning of her life since, and somewhere in there, without planning to, she stopped. She would realize it later, much later, standing at a window in a house on a hill, in a country she had not yet been to, with the wind off a sea she had not yet swum in coming through an open shutter, and she would try, for a second, to remember the current count, and she would not be able to, and she would understand in that second that she had not needed it anymore for a while, that the counting had been the wall, and the wall had quietly come down. For now, she only knew that it was a Tuesday night, and she was lying on her back in his bed with her head on his arm, and the city outside was doing its ordinary ongoing work, and Mr. Rienzi had gone back into retirement last week with a handshake and a bottle of something expensive and old, and Freddie was downstairs at her building reading the paper, still on the DeLuca payroll, apparently forever. And Priya was probably, given the hour, yelling at a boyfriend somewhere in Brooklyn, and Ben was asleep in New Jersey, and Camille was in a house she would not leave for a long time, and Victor Kowalski was, according to the quiet smile Rienzi had given her last week, indisposed, in a way that was neither her business nor her problem. For now she only knew that Adrian was awake, because she could feel the breath under her ear going slow and long and even, and that the slowness was, again, on purpose, but now not because she was scared, just because he liked her to match. Adrian. Yes. When are you going to take me home? He turned his head on the pillow and looked at her. Spring, he said. End of April. Okay? Okay? Yes. You're sure? I'm sure. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Lena. Yes. Thank you for still being here. She turned on his arm, so she was facing him. She put her hand flat on his chest, over his heart, the way he had put his hand against the back of her skull in the car that day, the way he had put his palm against her cheek in the hospital room, the way she had, it turned out, been waiting her whole life to put her hand on a person. Thank you for coming, she said. I'll always come. I know. Good. He kissed the top of her head. She closed her eyes. In the morning they would get up and go to work and do the things two people who loved each other did in the ordinary, unremarkable daylight of the rest of their lives. For tonight, for this one quiet Tuesday, in a dark room above a bright city, on the long, unexpected, painfully beautiful road of two people who had decided, finally, to stop running from each other. There was nothing left to do but breathe. She breathed. He breathed. They slept. Spring came late that year. March stayed cold all the way through, and the first week of April dumped a wet snow on the city that turned the awnings of every bodega into sagging canvas tents, and made Freddie, downstairs, mutter in Spanish at the sky for 3 straight days. Lena watched it from her office window on the 42nd floor, from Adrian's kitchen at 6 in the morning with her hands around a mug, from the back of his car at night, on the drive home, sometimes her home, sometimes his, Sometimes they still hadn't worked out which was which, and neither of them seemed in a hurry to decide. She was a different woman now, in small ways, though she could not have pointed to the moment the change had finished, only to certain evidence. She wore her hair down on Fridays. She kept a toothbrush in his bathroom. She had stopped flinching, finally, when her desk phone rang. The last week of April, he put a ticket in her hand. She was standing at the kitchen counter eating a peach. He came up behind her, kissed the top of her shoulder, set a small folder down on the counter next to the peach. Adrian, pack light. When? Day after tomorrow. Adrian? I know. That's not enough time to... Lena. What? Pack light. She looked at him. He looked at her. His face had that thing in it again, the small, stubborn tenderness she had stopped trying to talk him out of, and she thought, okay. We're doing this. She put the peach down. She picked up the folder. Where? Home. Your home. Our home. If it ever becomes that. For now, mine. She looked at the ticket. She could not at first parse the name of the city on it. The letters were in a language she did not speak. She looked up at him. He smiled. The full smile. The one he had stopped rationing around her somewhere in February. And he said, 2 flights, 1 long, 1 short. A car on the other end. 8 days. You have nothing to do. That is the rule of this trip. You have nothing to do. You have nowhere to be. If you want to sit on a wall and look at a fig tree for 6 hours, I will sit with you. That is the trip. Boas ascetsem, Adrian. Yes. Will I meet them? Yes. The old women? Yes. Are they going to like me? He took the peach off the counter. He took a bite of it himself thoughtfully. He handed it back to her. They are going to like you, he said, because I love you and because you are likable. And because the older one, Nonna Pia, has been telling me since I was 11 years old that she would not die in peace until I brought a woman to her kitchen who was not embarrassed by her knives. She has, he paused, she has very loud knives. Okay, you'll see. She packed light. She did not, in fact, own clothes for the place he was taking her. The ticket, once she had shown it to Priya, had turned out to be for a city on a coast neither of them had heard of, in a country that did not, Priya pointed out, look big enough on the map to hold Adrian DeLuca's entire interior life. Lena did not buy anything new. She took 2 skirts and 3 blouses and a pair of jeans she had not worn in 6 years, and 1 dress, the navy one, the one she had worn to the restaurant with bad lighting, and she did not take any of her good shoes. She took the silver ring her grandmother had given her. She took her passport, which had 3 stamps in it, all of them from a girlhood she did not tell many people about. She took her phone. She did not take her laptop. For the first time since she was 24 years old, she left the building on the 42nd floor for 8 consecutive days and did not take work with her. And when she told Priya this, Priya laughed, a hard, surprised bark of a laugh, and then got quiet, and then said, "Good. About time. Don't come back until you've eaten a lot of bread." The flight was long, the way long flights are long. The bad sleep, the bad light, the coffee in a plastic cup at 4 a.m. European time, while the plane rumbled through some piece of the sky above a country she couldn't name. Adrian slept with his head against the window and his hand loose on her wrist, and she watched him sleep and thought, this is a thing I am allowed to do now, and she did not quite get used to the thought. The second flight was shorter and on a smaller plane, and when they stepped out onto the tarmac of a small white airport on the edge of a coast, the air hit her across the face, warm and green and salted and old, and she stopped on the top step of the air stair for a second because her body had not expected it. Adrian, 1 step below her, turned and looked up. "Lena, I'm okay. The air's different here." "Yeah, it does that." A man was waiting at the bottom of the stairs with a car and a hat in his hands. He was maybe 60, with a sun-dark face and hands like old leather, and when he saw Adrian coming down the steps, his eyes did a thing, a small glistening, and he stepped forward and did not hug him, only gripped his upper arms, hard, and said something in a language Lena didn't know. And Adrian said something back, and the man turned to Lena and took her hand between both of his and said, in careful, heavily accented English, "Miss, welcome. I have wait for you." "Thank you. My name's Stefano, Anything you want, you ask Stefano. Thank you, Stefano. He is good man. I know. I know you know. He winked at her, put her suitcase in the trunk of a dusty old Mercedes that had probably been black once and was now the color of a stone by the sea, and drove them for an hour and a half up into hills. She had not, looking down at them from the plane, understood were so high. The road climbed, and the trees changed. Olive, 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 something that might have been almond. And eventually, at a turn where the land opened out and she could see, far below, a thin blue line of sea. Stefano slowed the car, pointed through the windshield, and said, "There, casa." The house was not large. That was the first thing she noticed. It was a low stone thing, 2 stories, built into the shoulder of a hill, with pale green shutters and a red-tiled roof and a fig tree in the front, that might, Adrian said as they pulled in, have been 400 years old, or it might have been 60. Nobody in the family agreed. Bees were in the fig tree. The smell of the air was... She did not have a word for the smell of the air. It was warm stone, and something green that wasn't basil and wasn't rosemary, but was a cousin of both, and it was the sea underneath all of it, faint and far and steady, and there was a cat asleep on the front step. 2 women came out of the door. One was maybe 75, with short gray hair and a strong, straight back. The other was smaller, rounder, with white hair tied up in a kerchief, and eyes the same color as Adrian's. That one, the white-haired one, stopped when she saw Lena, put both hands over her own mouth, and said something in the language Stefano had spoken, and the other woman, the taller one, laughed. And Adrian walked up to both of them and took the white-haired woman in his arms and held her for a long time without speaking. "Lena," he said, when he could, "this is my Nonna Pia, and this is her sister Maria. They raised me every summer of my life until I was 17. Nonna, Zia. This is Lena Hart." Nonna Pia came down off the step. She was a full head shorter than Lena. She took Lena's face in both of her dry, strong hands, and she looked at her, and she looked at her, and Lena Hart, who had kept her hand still for 12 years, who had once sat in the back of a kidnapper's SUV and not cried, felt her eyes fill up, and one tear ran down and landed on the old woman's thumb. Nonna Pia nodded, once, like a woman confirming a suspicion. She patted Lena's cheek. She said something to Adrian in the language, not long, and Adrian's face opened, and he said, "Nonna." "What did she say?" He cleared his throat. "She said you have a good face. She said she was worried about what kind of face I would bring." Lena laughed, wet, surprised, and Nonna Pia laughed too, the dry little laugh of a small, strong old woman, and then she took Lena by the hand and led her into the house, and that was the beginning of the 8 days. The 8 days were ordinary. That was what Lena would remember for the rest of her life. Not that they were beautiful, though they were beautiful, but that they were ordinary. They woke up late. They ate bread with oil and salt at a table in the garden. Nonna Pia argued with Maria in the kitchen over whether to put chilies in the sauce. Stefano came by in the afternoons with fish sometimes, or with a letter for someone, or with nothing, just to sit on the front wall and smoke 1 cigarette and talk to Adrian in the slow, easy way of a man who had known another man since that other man was 7. The cat on the step turned out to be named Basilio. Basilio adopted Lena with the cool, proprietary calm of a creature who had watched a great many women come and go through that door, and had decided, after 2 afternoons of observation, that this one was acceptable. He slept on her feet in the kitchen while she read. He followed her out to the fig tree in the evening. Nonna Pia noticed. Nonna Pia approved. Nonna Pia said something to Adrian on the 3rd evening that made Adrian put his face in his hands and laugh until his shoulders shook, and when Lena asked what his grandmother had said, he wiped his eyes and said, "She said the cat has better taste in women than my mother did." "Your mother?" "Yes. You don't have to. I want to." He took her on the 4th day to the church in the hills. It was not a big church. It was half ruined, in fact, on one side, where a wall had fallen in some storm 150 years ago that Nonna Pia still referred to as the bad weather, and the roof over the nave was newer than the walls by 2 centuries. Inside it was cool and smelled like stone and wax and old wood. There was a small chapel off to the right, and in the small chapel there was a stone in the floor with a name carved on it in careful letters, Adrian's mother's name, and under it her birth year, and under that the year she had died, which was not quite 20 years ago now. And Adrian knelt down and put his hand flat on the stone, and he stayed there without speaking for a long time. Lena stood at the door of the chapel. She did not go in. She understood, without being told, that he had not brought her here so she could watch. He had brought her here so she would know where it was, and that he had brought her, and that the stone existed. Those were three separate things, and they were all the point. When he stood up, finally, he came back to her. His face was calm, and his eyes were wet. He said, "I haven't been here in 2 years." "Okay. I used to come every year. The year my father had his first heart attack, I didn't come. I told myself it was because I was needed in New York. I wasn't, not really. I was needed in New York, but not that week. I didn't come because I was angry at her for dying without telling me she was sick, and I was angry at myself for being angry at her, and I didn't want to kneel down on this stone and feel both of those things at the same time. So I didn't come. And the next year I didn't come either, because if you skip a year, the second year is easier to skip. And then I was 38, and it had been 2 years, and I thought, I am becoming the kind of man who does not come to his mother's grave. And I did not like that man, and I decided the next time I came, I would not come alone. She didn't say anything. He took her hand. "I did not know at the time who I was going to bring," he said. "I had a guess." They walked out of the church. The hills were gold in the late light. A goat, somewhere below the road, was making the sound a goat makes when nobody else is paying attention to it. Stefano was asleep in the car with the window down. Adrian put her into the passenger seat. He did not let go of her hand until he had to. That night, after dinner, after the wine, after Maria had gone up the stone stairs to bed, and Nonna Pia had accepted Lena's help with the dishes, with the grave courtesy of a queen accepting a gift, Adrian took her out to the garden wall and sat down on it and pulled her between his knees so her back was against his chest, and he put his chin on top of her head, and they looked at the stars, which were brighter here than she had known stars could be. "Lena, yes, I want to tell you some things. Okay? Some of them are about my family. Some of them are about what my family does. Some of them are things you will not find in any article, because we have paid a great deal of money over a great many years to make sure they are not in any article. And some of them are things you will find in articles if you know where to look, and you will not like the way the articles phrase them. I'm going to tell you all of them. I'm going to tell you them while you are sitting with your back against me, so that if you need to get up and walk away, you will not have to look at my face to do it. Do you understand?" "Gomos. Yes. Are you ready?" "Yes." He told her. He told her for almost an hour. He told her about his grandfather, who had come to the United States in 1951 with $12 and a name that was not the name he had been born with, and who had built, over the course of 40 years, a shipping business in 3 countries, and had, in the course of building it, made a great many decisions about a great many people, some of which were decisions Lena would not want to have made. He told her about his father, who was still alive, and who was the kind of man who did not call. He told her about his uncle, the one in the cemetery in Queens, and he told her finally the whole of the story about the parking lot, which was not quite the story he had told her in her office that day, because in the story he told her in her office that day, the word lawyers had been doing more work than the word should have to do, and in the real story there had been, he admitted quietly into the top of her hair, a year of his life during which he had seriously, in detail, with paper and pen, planned a thing he had, in the end, not done. He told her about the not doing. He told her how he had come to the decision and what it had cost him, and what he had spent the next 5 years of his life doing in order to become the man who had not done it. He told her about Kowalski, the whole of it, what Kowalski had been and what Kowalski was now, and what Rienzi's quiet smile had meant, that afternoon months ago, when he had used the word indisposed, which was not, it turned out, a euphemism for anything violent. Kowalski was in federal custody in another country on charges that had taken 3 years to build and had been handed to the appropriate authorities by Adrian's people in a very specific week for very specific reasons. Kowalski would not be out, Adrian said, in his lifetime. Kowalski would not, Adrian said, have been out in his lifetime even if Lena had not been put in a black SUV in front of a bodega on Lexington Avenue. The timing had been a matter of months. "I need you to know that," he said, Because I need you to know that what we did the day I walked into that warehouse it was not a substitute for something worse. It was the plan. It was the plan the whole time. I did not go soft on your behalf. I went with the plan. Okay? And Lena, yes. My cousin, yes. She is not going to come back. Ever. Her husband divorced her last month. Her son came to see me in New York 3 weeks ago. He is 19. He stayed for 2 hours. We talked. I told him some things I had not planned to tell him because he asked and because he deserved answers. He's not angry at me. He is angry at his mother. He will, I think, not be angry at her forever, but he has allowed his time. I wanted you to know, because you met him once, years ago, at a Christmas party, and he remembered your name, Adrian. Yes. Is there anything else? He was quiet for a long time. She could feel his heart through her back, steady, slow. There is one more thing, he said eventually, and it is the only thing on this list that I am asking you for something about. Everything else I have been telling you to tell you. This one is a question. Okay, I am not the man my grandfather was. I am not the man my father was. I have tried very hard for a long time not to be. I will not always get it right. There will be decisions over the years of my life about what this family does and does not do, and I will be part of making those decisions, and some of them will be harder than others, and I will not always be proud of every single one of them. I will try. I will try harder than I have tried at anything else in my life because of you. But I want you to know tonight, under this sky, before we go any further, that you are marrying, he caught himself, that if you were to marry a man like me, you would be marrying a man who is trying and not a man who has finished. Do you understand the difference? She turned her head against his chest, so her ear was over his heart. Yes. I don't want to surprise you later. You won't. Lena. Yes. Is that okay with you? She thought about the diner on Route 9. She thought about the girl who had learned, at 19, to keep her hands still. She thought about the reception desk on the 38th floor, and the wrong folder, and the right folder, and the small hard moment in the elevator 7 years later when a man she had loved without permission had finally turned his body toward her and asked her the question she had been waiting her whole life for someone to ask. She thought about Ben with the bandage, Priya crying in the kitchen, Mrs. Alvarez with the picadillo, Freddie, the doorman, Rienzi, Basilio the cat asleep on her feet under the kitchen table, the stone in the chapel floor, the man behind her breathing on purpose against her back, trying to match her. She thought, this is not a man without cost. This is not a love without cost. There is not, for anyone who has ever loved anyone, a love without cost. You pay. You pay for the good one, and you pay for the bad one, and you pay for the one that doesn't happen. The only question is what you get for the money. Yes, she said. It's okay with me. Are you sure? Adrian, I spent 7 years of my life trying very hard not to love you. I was bad at it. I was bad at it in the way people are bad at not breathing. I am not going to sit on a wall in the hills where your mother is buried and pretend I have not already done the math. He didn't speak. She kept going because her mouth was moving on its own now, the way it had moved in the elevator. I know you are not finished, she said. I know you are trying. I know there are edges. I know there are hours of your day I'm not going to ask you about. I know that when you tell me I handled it, sometimes I am not going to want a longer sentence. I know I am not marrying a priest. I know I am not marrying my grandfather. I am marrying, if I am marrying, a man who walked into a warehouse with an envelope instead of a gun, and who then sat in a chair by a hospital bed for 4 hours without moving, and who buys me soup, and who pays my doorman, and who lets me be the person who is wrong sometimes. That's the man. I see the man. I'm not confused. Lena. What? I didn't actually ask you yet. She laughed against his chest. I know. I was going to do it tomorrow. I had a whole thing. I had Nona Pia's ring. It belonged to my mother before it belonged to her. I was going to... There was a speech. Give it to me tomorrow. Okay. But I wanted you to know the answer tonight. Okay. He was quiet for a minute. Then he said very softly, Thank you. Adrian. Yes. Don't thank me for loving you. Okay. He didn't thank her for loving her again, but he did, in the morning, on the terrace above the sea with Nonna Pia watching from the kitchen window and pretending not to, kneel down on a tile that was older than his family's name in America. And he did ask her, formally, with the speech, which was shorter than he had planned because his voice kept doing a thing. And she said yes a second time, and the ring, a small old ring, gold, with a stone the color of water in a deep well, was too big for her finger, and Nonna Pia, that afternoon, took it into the village to be sized while Lena and Adrian sat on the wall and ate figs off the tree and did not talk about anything important. They were married in the small chapel off the nave of the half-ruined church in the hills 6 weeks later, at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday with 23 people in attendance. Stefano wore a tie, badly. Maria made Lena a bouquet out of rosemary and tiny white daisies that Lena would press between the pages of a book and still have, yellowed, 30 years later. Priya flew in from New York with a dress bag and a small box that turned out to contain a pair of earrings Lena had admired once, 2 years before, in a store on Madison Avenue, and had not bought. Ben came with his wife, a woman named Ruth, whom Lena had never met and who turned out, within half an hour of meeting, to be the kind of friend Lena had been waiting her whole adult life to stumble into. Mr. Rienzi came in the same gray coat with a woman he did not introduce and whom nobody asked about, and he gave Lena a small wooden box and said, "For me, miss, a very long time overdue." And inside the box was a rosary of smooth black beads that had belonged to his mother, and Lena cried on him for 30 seconds, and he stood there with his eyes closed and one hand patting her back like a man who had been hoping for this particular errand his whole life. Adrian's father flew in from Milan. He did not speak much English. He took Lena's hands between his own hands. They were big and veined and old, and he looked at her for a long time with eyes that were Adrian's eyes in 30 years, and he said, in slow, careful, accented English, "My son is a better man than I am. This is you. Thank you." And then he walked away, fast so she would not see him cry. Nonna Pia stood next to Lena in the chapel and held her elbow the entire time because Adrian had said, in English to Lena the night before, "If she asks, can she walk you in? My mother is not here and my father is... He is here, but he is not. And she is the one who raised me, Lena. She is the one." And Lena had said, "Of course." And Nonna Pia had cried, in a language Lena did not speak, in Lena's arms for a long time. Adrian's brother Matteo flew in from Milan with his wife. His actual wife, Lena noted, and chose not to notice, and he hugged his brother in the churchyard before the ceremony for so long and so silently that Stefano, passing by with a tray, stopped and set the tray down on a wall and waited until they were done. They exchanged 2 plain gold bands. They said the words the priest gave them to say, and they said a few words of their own. Adrian said, looking at her in the soft light of the chapel, "I was 32 years old on a Thursday in March, and you got me the wrong folder, and I fell in love with you for the first time, and I have been falling in love with you, without interruption, on every single day of my life since. I will keep falling. I will never get to the bottom of it. I promise you that in front of these people, in this place, in front of everyone in my life I have ever loved, living or otherwise. And I promise you that for the rest of the time that I am alive to promise you anything." And Lena, who had written hers down and had meant to read them, set the paper down on the small wooden rail beside her and said, "I was 24 years old, and I was sitting at the wrong desk, and you came out of an elevator and did not smile at me once, and I made up my mind that morning that I was going to work for you if it killed me, because I had never seen anyone pay that much attention to whether a folder was the right color, and I thought, whoever that man is, he is taking something seriously, and I am not going to let him do it alone. And I—" Her voice broke, and she waited, and the priest waited, and the room waited, and she let it break, and she kept going. "And I am not going to let you do it alone. I am not going to let you do any of it alone, not the good parts, not the other parts, not any of it. That is the part I promise, the not alone part, for the rest of it." They walked out of the chapel together into sunlight that was honest and warm. They ate on trestle tables under the fig tree. Nonna Pia's food, Maria's food, Stefano's fish, until the light went low and the candles came out, and Matteo produced a small accordion from somewhere and played something slow and embarrassing that made Adrian's father laugh for the first time anyone there could remember. And Priya and Ruth got drunk together in a corner and became, Lena would realize later, permanent fixtures in each other's lives. Basilio the cat sat under Lena's chair the whole night and did not once try for her plate, which Nonna Pia noticed and commented on darkly, in a tone that suggested the cat had risen permanently in her estimation. It got late. The guests went slowly, in twos and threes, down the hill to the small hotel in the village where they had all been put up. The older people went up to bed in the house. Someone, Stefano probably, blew out the candles on the long table and left them to the dark. And Adrian took his wife's hand, and he walked her around the side of the house to the wall where they had sat a month and a half before, and he sat her down on it, and he stood in front of her with his hands on her knees, and he looked up at her in the last of the moonlight, and he said, "Lena di Luca." She laughed, a quick, startled, watery laugh, because hearing the name out loud did something to her chest she had not been ready for. "Hi. Hi. I'm tired." "Me too. Let's go to bed." "In a minute." "Okay." He stayed in front of her with his hands on her knees, and she looked down at him, and she thought, for a reason she could not have named in that particular second, in that particular place, about her hands. She thought about how steady they had been for 12 years, how they had been steady in a diner, and steady at a reception desk, and steady in an elevator, and steady in the back of an SUV, and steady somehow in a warehouse, and steady on a folding chair. She had built her whole life on that steadiness. She had thought, for a long time, that that steadiness was what she was, that if she ever lost it, there would be nothing underneath. And then, at 31, a man she had loved without permission for 7 years had stopped an elevator between 2 floors of a black glass building and asked her one question, and she had answered, and her hands had not been steady. They had shaken. They had shaken for days. They had shaken in his kitchen and on his couch and in her own bed at 3:40 in the morning, and the world had not ended. The shaking had been the life. The steadiness had been the waiting room. She understood, sitting on a wall in the hills of a country she had now, at last, come to, understood it in the small and quiet way one understands the true things, which never arrive as thunder, that the whole long secret of her life had been a simple one, that a person was not made worthy by how still she could hold her hands. A person was made worthy by what she finally, one day, found that she could not hold anymore, that the real courage of a life was not in the knot breaking. The real courage was in letting go of the thing you had been holding and trusting that, when it hit the ground, it would be caught. Sometimes it was not caught. Sometimes you hit the ground with it, but you had to, eventually, find out. She had found out. She was sitting on a wall. A man she loved was holding on to her knees. The world was not ending. It was, in fact, beginning, not in the cinematic way, not with trumpets, but in the real way, which was quiet and domestic and smelled like rosemary and old stone, and was full of people whose names she now knew, and whose names, in turn, knew hers. She put her hands in his hair. It was soft. She had never, in 7 years, 2 months, and 11 days, plus a great many other days that she had stopped counting, put her hands in his hair. "Adrian." "Yes." "Take me to bed." "Yes." "And Adrian." "Yes. We're going back to New York in 8 days, and we are going to live the rest of our lives on a 42nd floor and a 44th floor, and in 2 apartments we haven't decided between yet. And we are going to have breakfast, and we are going to have meetings, and we are going to have Tuesdays. And on some of those Tuesdays, bad things are going to happen, and on most of them, nothing is going to happen at all. And I want you to know that the nothing happening Tuesdays are the ones I am marrying you for. Not the elevator, not the warehouse, not the wall. The Tuesdays. Toto. Mom Tati. He put his forehead against her knee. "Okay. Okay. Lena." "Yes. Thank you for the Tuesdays." "You're welcome." He stood up. He pulled her off the wall. He put his arm around her shoulders. They walked together back toward the house, slowly, because Nonna Pia's hill was steeper than it looked, and because there was no hurry, not anymore, not ever again. Behind them, the long table sat empty under the fig tree, with the candles burned out and the last of the wine in the bottom of a glass that Basilio, after considering it for a long moment in the dark, declined with his usual good judgment to investigate. Above them, the sky did what the sky in these hills had done for every night of every year of every life that had ever been lived underneath it. It held its stars. It held its quiet. It held tonight, among all of the countless small and breakable and ordinary things it had ever held, two people who had, at last, stopped running. From each other, from themselves, from the slow and unglamorous and entirely human business of letting their hands shake, and being seen shaking, and being loved. Not in spite of it, but for it. And on the other side of the world, in a city neither of them would live in forever, but both of them would always, in some secret corner of themselves, call the first home. A doorman named Freddie was reading a newspaper, and a woman named Priya was asleep on a plane, and a man named Ben was teaching his daughter to ride a bicycle in a driveway in New Jersey, and a 42nd floor full of empty offices was waiting, patiently, for Monday. The building had a mood. The people who worked there liked to say. On good days, the whole thing hummed. On bad days, it held its breath. It would hold its breath, now and then, for the rest of their lives. But on most days, on the Tuesdays, on the plain, unexceptional Tuesdays that would make up the long, greater part of the years they had left, it would simply hum, the way buildings hum, and two people would ride the elevator up together, and nobody, not Marcus at the desk, not the paralegals in the express bank, not even the elevator itself, would remember, after a while, that there had ever been a night when it stopped between 41 and 42. Only they would remember, and they would remember it, from then on, the way people remember the moment a door opened in a life they had thought was already finished, with gratitude and with a small private awe, and with the steady, unremarkable, deeply ordinary love of two people who had, in the end, chosen each other, on purpose and on time.